Chapter 33-36. Chapter 331. Chapter 331. Should he be killed? Nyetian directly stomped Yang Sun to death. His eyes were filled with a cold light, and his entire body circulated with the power of gods and demons, causing his demonic energy to soar into the sky, making him look extremely terrifying. Everyone's eyes trembled uncontrollably. Their expressions were sluggish as they stared at the bloody scene on the ground in disbelief. The scene was dead silent. Only the whistling of the wind made the atmosphere even more gloomy and oppressive. The sixth Haoyan's figure suddenly descended. His eyes were fixed on Yetian, and his face was filled with shock. It was as if he had seen something extremely terrifying, and he couldn't speak for a long time. He killed Yang Sun. He really killed Yang Sun. After a long time, someone in the sky reacted and shouted as if he had gone mad. It was as if Yang Sun's death was the end of the world for them. The maids and sword mistresses were trembling in fear. They did not dare to make any noise, not even daring to breathe loudly. Nyetian's gaze swept across everyone, but his expression was very calm, without the slightest hint of nervousness. In his opinion, Yang Sun was a scum. So what if he was killed? There was nothing to be surprised about. Nyetian, why did you kill him? At that moment, Six Sky's eyes suddenly darkened, and he let out a low roar. He was clearly enraged. His eyes were like sharp swords, as if he wanted to pierce through Nyetian. When he heard that Nyetian was looking for Yang Sun, he immediately rushed over. However, he didn't expect that he was still a step too late. He had rushed over with all his might to save Nyetian, but the scene in front of him had greatly exceeded his expectations. It turned out that the person he needed to worry about was not Nyetian, but Yang Sun. He was afraid that Nyetian would die, but Yang Sun's death was even more serious. Shouldn't scum like him be killed? Nyetian looked at the Sixth Sky, his eyes calm and cold. He didn't understand why the Sixth Sky was so nervous now that Yang Sun was dead. Even if Yang Sun was Wan Jian, the Sixth Sky shouldn't be so nervous. Do you know who he is? Sixth Sky's rage soared to the heavens as he roared like thunder. His aura burst forth as a terrifying sword light shot out, slamming into the valley, causing the entire valley to tremble as if it was about to collapse. I don't know who he is, but I know that he has no regard for human life and hurt my friend. He deserves to die. Nyetian frowned. He had a bad feeling about this, but he still replied solemnly. You? Six Sky's eyes trembled, and he was speechless. Nyetian, do you know how much trouble you've caused? After a while, the Six Sky sighed with an extremely dejected expression. The reason why Yang Sun dared to throw his weight around in the Sky Sword Martial competition was not because of his identity as Wan Jian, but because he had a father who was a guardian of the sky. Everyone in the Sky Sword Martial School knew that Yang Sun was backed by an expert. However, there were very few people who knew who was behind Yang Sun. Six Sky, of course, knew Yang Sun's identity. Otherwise, he wouldn't have let Yang Sun go. Now that Nyetian had killed Yang Sun, the Sixth Sky was in a dilemma. Yang Sun's father was called Yanggungri. He was ranked second among the 7 guardians of sky. He was extremely powerful and extremely protective. His son had died in the 6th Sword Mountain group. Not only would Nyetian be in trouble, but the Sixth Sky would also be in trouble. The Sky Sword Martial School was divided into 6 Sword Mountain groups. Each sky was in charge of a Sword Mountain group. The Sixth Sky was in charge of the 6th Sword Mountain group. Yang Sun had died in front of the Sixth Sky, so Yanggungri would definitely cause trouble for the Sixth Sky. Lord Sixth Sky, in my heart, there is only right and wrong. There is no distinction. Nyetian had already guessed that Yang Sun's identity was very terrifying, but he was still very calm. He said lightly, as the saying goes, if a prince breaks the law, he will be punished the same as a commoner. No matter how high Yang Sun's status is, he shouldn't have killed at will. If I had known his identity in advance, I would have killed him all the same, because he deserves to be killed. The Sixth Sky's face darkened slightly. He looked at Nyetian, and his heart trembled. He saw himself in Nyetian when he was young. The current Nyetian was like a sword, showing off his abilities. Six Hao Yin was silent for a while. Suddenly, his gaze turned cold. He swept his gaze over everyone and finally focused on the 10,000 swords. He said coldly, "No one is allowed to say a word about what happened here today. Otherwise," swoosh, a cold light flashed in the six guys' eyes. A ray of sword essence whizzed out and shot into a mountain wall like a sharp blade. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Everyone's eyes widened. Immediately after, the mountain wall actually split into two halves. This. Everyone's eyes suddenly froze, and they all gasped. Horror was written all over their faces. The sixth sky had only released a ray of sword essence, but it had split a mountain into two halves. Such strength was shocking. Such a strong sword intent. Nye Tian's pupils constricted as he was shocked. Sixth Hao Yin's sword intent was many times stronger than Yang Sun's. They couldn't be mentioned in the same breath. Nye Tian guessed that the sixth sky's sword principle had most likely reached the second stage of the sage stage, the oracle stage. Yes, yes, yes. We definitely won't say a word. At this time, the Wan Jin immediately lowered their heads and said yes. Their faces were pale, and they didn't even dare to look at the sixth sky. Obviously, the sixth sky was trying to protect Nye Tian. This made the Wan Jin even more certain that Nye Tian was not to be trifled with. Listen up, today's duel was a normal duel between Nye Tian and Yang Sun. Yang Sun was defeated and killed. His position as the Wan Jin will be inherited by Nye Tian. The sixth sky said in a threatening tone. In the sky sword principle, any swordsman could challenge someone who was more powerful than him. As long as you could kill that person, you could inherit his position. The sixth sky said that Nye Tian had killed Yang Sun as a normal duel. Obviously, he was using the rules of the sky sword principle to protect Nye Tian. Upon hearing Hao Yin's words, Nye Tian couldn't help but be taken aback. He didn't expect that the sixth sky would protect him like this. What surprised him even more was that the sixth sky wanted him to inherit Yang Sun's position as the Wan Jin. In this way, Nye Tian had changed from swordfish to a Wan Jin. He was definitely the fastest person to become a Wan Jin in the history of the sky sword principle. The Wan Jin's eyes were trembling, and their faces were gloomy. They didn't dare to speak and just nodded. At this time, they certainly didn't dare to disobey the sixth sky. The sixth sky's cold eyes swept across everyone. His face was so gloomy that it was frightening. Everyone could clearly feel the threatening aura, and it was suffocating. Nye Tian, you've recovered well, and your level of swordsmanship has improved. This is beyond my expectation. After a while, the sixth sky suddenly looked at Nye Tian and said in a deep voice, "It seems that our duel will be brought forward." "Sure, when?" Nye Tian smiled faintly. He was also looking forward to the duel with the sixth sky. He wanted to see how terrifying the control of the sword will of a swordsman in the Oracle realm was. Chapter 33-37. Nye Tian's eyes widened when he heard sixth sky mention the word now. He could not hide the excitement in his eyes. He did not expect sixth sky to challenge him to a duel. Although he was injured, it did not affect him too much. Most importantly, he wanted to see just how strong the sixth Hao Yin's swordsmanship was. Sixth Sky had already displayed the power of his sword intent, which was incomparable to Yang Sun's. Nye Tian speculated that Sixth Sky had most likely reached the second stage of Sacred Sword Principle, the Oracle stage. It was a learning opportunity for Nye Tian to fight against a swordsman at such a stage. Furthermore, he knew that Sixth Hao Yin didn't really want to fight him. Instead, he wanted to test his strength. Master Sixth Sky, we'll take our leave. The Wan Jins bowed slightly and were about to leave. They believed that Sixth Sky did not want anyone to witness the duel. No need, you guys stay here and watch the duel. Sixth Sky said in a deep voice, not allowing the Wan Jins to leave. Yes, the Wan Jins were confused, but they nodded immediately with joy in their eyes. They also wanted to see just how strong the sixth vast heaven was. Nye Tian, let's begin. Sixth Sky's eyes narrowed slightly. He came to the sky and said calmly. As soon as he finished speaking, a mystical aura of sword intent appeared on his body and circulated around his body. It was able to greatly suppress his sword intent. "Thank you, Lord Sixth Hao Yin, for sealing your sword intent." With a faint smile, Nietian blurred into action and flew into midair. QL-11, the mysterious sword intent around Sixth Hao Yin, was used to seal his own sword intent. He had mentioned that he would suppress his sword intent to the same level as Nietian's in the duel. "Make your move." Number 6 stood in the sky with his hands clasped behind his back. The sword will in his body was condensed, but his aura was getting sharper and sharper. The sharpness of his aura was extremely terrifying. Nietian looked at Six Hao Yin and said with a faint smile, "Lord Six Hao Yin, I'm already at the Transcendent Sword Body stage. You can raise your sword intent to the Transcendent Sword Body stage." The sword intent aura in the sixth guy had actually been suppressed to the Transcendent Soul Shocking Realm, which was one realm lower than Nietian's. "When I challenged you, you were only at the Transcendent Sword Soul level. Therefore, my current realm is suppressed to the Transcendent Sword Soul." The sixth guy looked calm and said, "Moreover, you have just fought with Yang Sun and are already injured. If I, the sky, were to fight you with the ultimate divine sword body, wouldn't I be bullying you? If that's the case, then I won't hold back." Nietian laughed, and his lips curled into a fierce smile. The sixth guy was a senior expert. Since he was so confident, he must have something to rely on. Therefore, it was unnecessary for Nietian to worry about him. "Yes." The sixth guy nodded. He looked calm and didn't seem to be panicking at all. 9 limits of starry sky, heaven slash. At that moment, the sword aura around Nietian rose, and he slashed with his sword. A huge sword shadow appeared and pressed down on the sixth sky. He was just testing the sixth sky with this sword attack. He wanted to see how strong the sixth sky was. Sixth Hao Yin did not move in the slightest in the face of the sword silhouettes that pressed down on him. He stood there like a boulder in a storm, unafraid of any impact. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Just as the sword shadow was about to fall, the sixth sky's figure moved. Then, a dazzling light appeared and turned into countless small sword shadows in the air, forming a rain of swords. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The next moment, the huge sword shadow fell, but it was blocked by the small sword shadows and slowly devoured. In the blink of an eye, Nietian's sword shadow was torn to pieces. What he saw caused Nietian's face to drop, and his expression to turn extremely grim. The sixth sky's strength had far exceeded his expectations. The sixth sky had suppressed his sword realm to the Transcendent Sword Soul. Why was his sword will still so strong? At that moment, the Ghost Emperor's voice echoed out. "Nietian, this man is an expert in the Tao of the sword. His mastery of sword intent is far beyond your imagination." Nietian nodded with a solemn expression. Yeah, to be praised by the Ghost Emperor, the sixth sky was undoubtedly powerful. In fact, the strength of a sword will only represented one aspect of a swordsman's strength. The more important aspect was the swordsman's control over sword will. It was just like the same sword in the hands of a healer and a warrior, but the power it could display was completely different. The sixth sky had suppressed his sword realm to the Transcendent Sword Soul, while Nietian had the Transcendent Sword Body. Therefore, at this moment, in terms of the strength of sword will, Nietian was stronger than the sixth sky. However, the sixth sky's understanding, control, and use of sword will were far beyond Nietian's. "Your sword will is very strong, but your understanding of sword will is too weak," the sixth sky said coldly as he glanced at Nietian. Again, Nietian's eyes grew grim as he let out a bellow, and his sword intent burst forth like raging waves, filling the surroundings with a rumble. He had originally thought that his control over the sword will had already reached the acme of perfection. However, compared to Sixth Hao Yin's, he was actually so weak. This did not make him feel discouraged. Instead, it stimulated his fighting spirit. 9 limits of the starry sky, sun extermination. As Nietian shouted, the star heavenly slash slashed across the sky, blossoming with dazzling sword light. In the blink of an eye, strands of sword intent converged and morphed into a sword shadow that shot towards Hao Yin. However, the sixth sky still moved. The sky was full of sword shadows, and the air was filled with a terrifying, strangling power. It easily dissolved Nie Tian's attack. "You have enough momentum, but it's not sharp enough," the sixth sky said calmly. "Is that so?" Nie Tian's face darkened. His fighting spirit became even stronger. His aura surged wildly as he attacked several times, but the attacks were all easily dissolved by the sixth sky. The sixth Hao Yin stood there like a strange peak, so high that it was impossible to climb. Nie Tian's sword will surged violently. His eyes flickered with excitement. It was a great opportunity for him to fight against an expert in sword principle like the sixth sky. Even though the sixth Hao Yin hadn't made a move yet, Nie Tian's understanding of sword intent had already reached a new level. He had thought that he had unleashed the power of sword will to the extreme. However, the sixth sky's control of sword will had given him a new understanding of sword will. "Nie Tian, you still have one more chance." At that moment, sixth Hao Yin spoke indifferently and said in a deep voice, "After this sword, it's my turn to attack." "All right," Nie Tian agreed. His eyes trembled, and the sword will in his body surged wildly in an instant. At this moment, he used the celestial evolution sacred power. The sword will aura around him suddenly surged to the extreme. The sword principle realm had broken through to the ultimate god realm. Interesting. The sixth guy looked at Nie Tian, and his eyes narrowed. The corner of his mouth twitched into a sharp smile. Chapter 33-38. The sky made his move. The 10,000 Peaks of Thunder. Sixth Hao Yin held the Yuan spirit sword in his hand, and a terrifying sword was released. It was natural yet incomparably sharp, and it filled the entire valley, causing the surrounding space to tremble. It was Nie Tian's first time seeing Sixth Guy unleashing the Yuanling sword. His eyes flickered as he was astonished by his opponent's aura. Even though Sixth Guy's sword intent was not much different from before, his sword aura was several times stronger after he held the sword. The sword was like a second life for a swordsman. It was not an exaggeration to say that a swordsman with or without a sword in his hand was completely different. However, after Sixth Sky held the sword, his aura increased tremendously to the extent that Nie Tian was unable to believe it. Nie Tian, your last slash has allowed me, the sky, to resist your ultimate sword intent with my ultimate sword spirit. Sixth Sky looked at Nie Tian with a calm smile. His eyes flickered with excitement. It seemed like he was looking forward to seeing the power of Nie Tian's next slash. All right. Nie Tian's eyes flickered with a blazing light. He let out a low roar and gathered his sword intent. The starlight heavenly slash streaked across the sky. Wherever it passed, a dazzling sword light would flash across the sky. Moreover, it contained a terrifyingly fierce offensive power. Nie Tian did not hold back at all with this slash. This guy, he's so strong. Up in the sky, the eyes of the several experts from the sword Dao sect flickered as they sensed the might of Nie Tian's sword strike. Nie Tian's strength had far exceeded their expectations. It was terrifying. Bring it on. Meanwhile, in the sky, Sixth Sky's expression did not change at all. He was as calm as an ancient well. In the next moment, the thunderous sword in his hand slashed across the sky. Following this, a terrifying sword intent appeared around his body, which instantly formed an enormous sword shield that covered his entire figure like a mountain. In the face of Nie Tian's all-out attack, Sixth Sky still only defended and did not attack. It wasn't that he looked down on Nie Tian, but he had complete confidence in his own strength. Rumble. Hum. At this moment, Nie Tian's sword fell down and landed on the sword shield in the Sixth Sky. The air rumbled, and then the space suddenly sank, making a low, muffled sound. The sword's shadow stagnated in the air and couldn't advance any further. The sword and shield around Sixth Hao Yin seemed ordinary and unremarkable, but they contained an extremely terrifying power. Furthermore, the power of the sword intent was completely unleashed in his hands, causing the defensive power of the sword shield to be extremely terrifying. Even if Niet Tian attacked with all his strength, he would not be able to break the sword shield. Niet Tian's eyes narrowed and his face turned pale. He had already reached the transcending god ultimacy stage. Why was it still so difficult for him to fight against Six Sky, who had reached the transcending god sword soul stage? Just how terrifying was Sixth Hao Yan's control over sword will? Niet Tian, your sword intent is very strong, but it's not enough to amaze me. Six Sky laughed and said calmly, but his voice was filled with arrogance. Is that so? Niet Tian's eyes suddenly darkened. The sword intent in his body suddenly increased again, and streams of sword intent were forcibly injected into the sword shadow, causing the surrounding space to tremble violently. Crack! At this moment, a crisp sound was heard. A crack appeared on the sword shield. Six Sky's eyes narrowed and his expression changed. Niet Tian had actually torn his sword shield apart with his sword intent. Crack, crack, crack. However, the situation suddenly changed. The crack directly spread, and the crack on the sword shield instantly expanded, as if it would collapse in the next moment. How is this possible? When the people above saw this scene, their eyes trembled violently, and they could not believe their eyes. Niet Tian was really going to break Six Sky's sword shield. Boom! Then, in the midst of everyone's astonishment, a loud explosion sounded out as the sword shield shattered into pieces. Six Sky's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, a look of panic appeared on his face. He felt a strong, oppressive force falling, shrouding him, trying to suppress him directly. Such a scene was something that he had never imagined, so he was incomparably shocked. But after all, he was a swordsman in the Oracle realm. He regained his composure in an instant. With a thought, sword wings condensed from sword shadows appear behind him, and he moved in a flash, retreating backward. Boom! His reaction was fast, but he was still a bit too slow. The sword shadow suddenly fell, stirring up terrible waves in the void, rushing around. Bang! Six Sky's figure was hit, and he retreated thousands of meters, but then he stood firmly. He was not injured, but he looked very embarrassed. Everyone's eyes were focused on Six Sky, and their expressions were filled with disbelief and shock. No one had expected that Niet Tian would be able to force Sixth Hao Yan into such a desperate situation. The fact that Niet Tian had killed Yang Sun in such a domineering manner shocked everyone even more. But at this time, Niet Tian's face was as pale as a piece of paper. That sword attack just now had consumed too much of his strength. Niet Tian, you have amazed me, Sky. At this time, Six Sky opened his mouth. His eyes were as sharp as swords, staring at Niet Tian. Next, it's my turn, Sky. Bring it on. Niet Tian took a deep breath and said in a deep voice. He was exhausted, but he did not retreat. He was confident that with his swordsmanship strength and strong martial body, he would be able to resist Six Sky's attack. Hao Yan will only attack once. You better watch carefully. Six Sky twitched the corner of his mouth and raised the 10,000 peaks of thunder high. Sword of 10,000 peaks, roar of thunder. Roar. As soon as he finished speaking, he stabbed out with his sword. A gust of sword essence whistled out and condensed into a thunder beast in the air. With a roar, it pressed down on Niet Tian. Niet Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. The pressure he felt in an instant almost suffocated him. The monstrous momentum that Six Sky's sword attack seemed to be able to suppress everything. It was extremely terrifying. Since you have condensed the sword essence into a beast, I will fight you with my dragon veins. Then, Niet Tian's eyes darkened, and the 9 supreme dragon meridians in his body started to circulate at a crazy speed. Boundless dragon chi was released, and in the middle of the sea of dragon chi, a crimson dragon appeared, emitting a majestic dragon might that shook the world. Boom, boom, boom. The dragon chi was wild and violent. It collided with the void and exploded. Roar! In the next second, the giant crimson dragon let out a violent roar. It rolled its body and pounced at the thunder beast. Boom! The two forces collided with each other, causing the void to tremble. A terrifying explosion was heard, and waves of waves appeared in the void. The eyes of the crowd trembled. The shock in their hearts was indescribable. The void became chaotic and only returned to normal after a long time. Two figures stood in the air. They were Nietion and Six Sky. Nietion's body swayed slightly. He was seriously injured, but his eyes were still sharp. Chapter 33-39. The mysterious Blackstone up in the sky. Six Sky had injured Nietion with a single slash. However, there was no joy in his eyes, only shock and excitement. Although Nietion was injured, he had managed to block his attack. The strength of Nietion's sword intent and martial body had far exceeded Six Sky's expectation. Nietion, you did well. A moment later, Six Sky spoke. His deep eyes were filled with a hint of passion as he looked at Nietion from afar. Nietion took a deep breath. His complexion slightly improved as he bowed and said, "Thank you for showing mercy, Lord Sixth Haotian." Six Sky's previous attack was extremely powerful, but it was obviously not his true strength. If Six Sky had wanted to kill Nietion, Nietion would have been a corpse by now. You're alive because you're strong. You don't need to thank this Sky. Six Sky's lips twitched, revealing a stiff smile. He then looked at the Wan Jian in the sky and said in a loud voice, "The battle between me, Sky, and Nietion ended in a draw." A draw? Those people were stunned, and their faces were filled with astonishment. In fact, Six Sky had the absolute advantage in the current situation. If the battle continued, even if Six Sky maintained his ultimate godly sword flesh, Nietion would not be able to withstand it. However, Six Sky said it was a draw, which made the Wan Jian feel strange. "Now, you can leave," Six Sky said coldly before they could react. "Farewell." The people were stunned, but they did not have time to think. They bowed and left the place. Six Sky clearly wants them to tell the others that the battle between me and him ended in a draw. Nietion looked at the figures of Wan Jian and could not help but frown. He thought to himself, is Six Sky trying to use this to increase my reputation? If news of his tie with Six Sky were to spread, Nietion's fame would undoubtedly skyrocket. It seemed that Six Sky was doing this to increase Nietion's fame. First, he helped Nietion suppress the news of him killing Yang's son. Then, he helped Nietion increase his fame. What was this Six Sky trying to do? "Nietion, you can go and save your friend now," said Haotian as he looked at Nietion with a confused look on his face. Nietion didn't think too much about it. He nodded and entered the secret chamber in the valley. The secret chamber was dark and damp, and the yin qi was extremely dense, giving off a very gloomy feeling. Nietion walked along the entrance and saw dungeons on both sides. The murderous aura in the surroundings was very dense. Inside the dungeons were piles of white bones that emitted an evil aura. Soul-burning curse. Nietion's eyes narrowed as he looked at the white bones. He could feel the extremely strong, soul-burning curse chi. It was obvious that the owners of these white bones had been planted with the soul-burning curse when they were alive, and they had died a horrible death in the dungeons. Nietion frowned and sped up. He soon found Mo Qianjun and Zhou Qiansheng in one of the dungeons. "Brother Nye." Mo Qianjun was in the dungeon. The moment he saw Nietion, he shouted excitedly. His eyes were filled with tears. He had not expected that Nietion would be able to find them. When he and Zhou Qiansheng were captured, they thought they were dead for sure. They never expected to see the light of day again. "Brother Mo, Brother Zhou Qian, you've suffered." Nietion saw Mo Qianjun and Zhou Qiansheng being pierced by chains. His eyes trembled, and his eyes were filled with anger. He released a sword will and directly blasted the dungeon's door open. As soon as he stepped into the dungeon, Nietion could feel the pungent, bloody aura and the thick soul-burning curse chi. His eyes trembled and his face was very unsightly. Mo Qianjun and Zhou Qiansheng were pierced by chains. The soul-burning cursed chi was carved on the chains, and the power of the curse was constantly seeping into their bodies. Yang Sun had used this method to imprison the two of them, making them endure inhumane torture. Nye Tian's face was gloomy. He only calmed down after a long time. He sensed Mo Qianjun and Zhou Qiansheng's aura, then carefully removed the chains for them. "Brother Mo, are you all right?" Nye Tian asked in a low voice as he supported Mo Qianjun and Zhou Qiansheng. Mo Qianjun's aura was still stable. He said nervously, "I'm fine. Can you check on Zhou Qiansheng?" "Okay," Nye Tian replied. His divine sense sensed the unconscious Zhou Qiansheng, and he couldn't help but frown. 3 days ago, he had forced the soul-burning cursed qi out of Zhou Qiansheng's body. But now, Zhou Qiansheng's body was once again filled with the power of the soul-burning cursed qi. Nye Tian took a deep breath. He didn't want others to see this scene. He once again used the power of the heavenly punishment to force the soul-burning cursed qi out of Zhou Qiansheng's body. Half a day later, Zhou Qiansheng woke up, but his consciousness was still chaotic. Then, Nye Tian helped Mo Qianjun force the soul-burning cursed qi out. After doing all this, he almost collapsed. "Nye Tian, are you all right?" Mo Qianjun asked anxiously when he saw Nye Tian's body drenched in cold sweat. "I'm fine." Nye Tian nodded slightly. Then, a cold glint flashed in his eyes as he said, "I will definitely make the person behind Yang Sun pay the heaviest price." Mo Qianjun and Zhou Qiansheng had suffered unimaginable pain, which had all been caused by Yang Sun. However, Yang Sun was obviously just a knife, and there was someone behind him who wielded the knife. Given Yang Sun's strength, it was impossible for him to control the soul-burning cursed qi. Hence, there had to be a powerhouse behind him. The fact that the sixth sky was so afraid of Yang Sun also proved this point. In the entire sky, there were only 7 great sword martialists who could make the sixth sky afraid of Yang Sun. Hence, the mastermind who had attacked Mo Qianjun and Zhou Qiansheng had to be one of the 7 great sky protectors. Nye Tian didn't care who this person was. He would definitely make them pay a painful price. The people in the dungeon had obviously been killed by this mastermind. It seemed like this mastermind was conducting some kind of experiment with the soul-burning cursed qi. Using swordsmen as an experiment, one could imagine how cruel this person was. It was unknown how many swordsmen in the Sky Sword Martialists had been killed by this person. Following this, Nye Tian carefully examined the secret chambers. He searched the dungeons one by one, hoping to find something valuable. "What is this?" At this time, he found a small stone platform that looked like an altar in the innermost dungeon. At the center of the stone platform, an altar, there was a black stone that looked very strange. The black stone was only the size of a palm and shaped like a goose egg. It was pitch black like the night sky, and its surface was very smooth. It seemed like it had been eroded by some kind of power for a long time. Nye Tian tried to sense the black stone, but he was shocked to discover that when his divine sense entered the black stone, it was as if he had fallen into a bottomless abyss. He immediately retracted his divine sense. His forehead was already drenched in cold sweat. In just an instant, his divine sense had almost been swallowed by the black stone. "What is this thing? Why is it so frightening?" Nye Tian's expression suddenly changed, and he felt a lingering fear. Chapter 3340. Chapter 335. Chapter 335. Being entrusted by someone. Eternal night, burning God. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. His expression suddenly changed, and his heart trembled inexplicably. He didn't know what the eternal night, burning God was, but his consciousness had almost been devoured just now. This made him extremely fearful of this mysterious black stone. "Nye Tian, take the eternal night, burning God. Let's leave this place," the Ghost Emperor said cautiously and nervously. He had calmed down a lot. "Okay." Nye Tian didn't ask any questions. He agreed and released a sword intent from his hand, which wrapped the eternal night, burning God. Then, he left the secret room. After a while, Nye Tian, Mo Qianjun, and Zhou Qiansheng walked out of the secret room and arrived in the valley. Sixth Sky Master. At this time, he found that the Sixth Sky was still there. The maids and sword mistresses were also there, waiting for him. Nietian, you've finally come out. The Sixth Sky looked at Nietian. His eyes swept over Mo Qianjun and Zhou Qiansheng, and he looked quite surprised. Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly as he asked, "Is there anything else, Lord Haotian?" The Sixth Sky had been waiting for him for half a day. He couldn't have just sighed. "Nietian, your friends are safe now. I, the Sky, have something to tell you. Come with me." The Sixth Sky said indifferently as his eyes swept over Mo Qianjun and Zhou Qiansheng. Nietian frowned. He didn't know what the Sixth Sky wanted to tell him. He was a little worried about Mo Qianjun and Zhou Qiansheng, so he didn't dare to leave casually. "Don't worry. Now that you have the identity of Wan Jian, this valley is yours from now on. Before the sword seal in the sky is opened, no one will dare to cause trouble for you," the Sixth Sky said cold, as he could tell what Nietian was worried about. "Okay, let's go." Nietian nodded. His figure moved, and he was about to leave with the Sixth Sky. "What do you plan to do with these people?" Sixth Sky frowned as he looked at the female attendants and sword ladies in the sky. They entered the sky sword martial arts to hone their swordsmanship, not to be slaves or to be toyed with. Nietian narrowed his eyes and said, "From now on, they are no different from other swordsmen." Sixth Sky nodded and did not say anything else. Nietian didn't say anything else either. He had the maids leave. With his current strength, he could not decide the fate of the entire Sky sword martial sect. However, since he was already Wan Jian, he would no longer have any maids or sword mistresses under him. The maids and sword ladies were dumbfounded for a long time before they finally reacted and left with shocked expressions. They didn't expect that Nietian would let them go just like that. They had come to the Sky sword martial arts to stimulate the swordsmanship of the Sword Mountain like other swordsmen and use it to cultivate their swordsmanship. After all the maids and sword ladies left, Nietian asked Mo Qianjun and Zhou Qiansheng to stay in the valley while he left with the Sixth Sky. After a while, the figures of the Sixth Sky and Nietian arrived at a hidden valley. "Nietian, do you know who is behind Yangsun?" The Sixth Sky did not beat around the bush and asked directly. Nietian shook his head. There was no nervousness on his face. He was very calm. "Yangsun's father is Yang Gongri, the guardian of the Sky sword martial arts. He is ranked second among the 7 guardians." The Sixth Sky frowned and said in a deep voice, "With his strength, even I, the Sky, am like an ant in front of him, let alone you. So the person behind Yangsun is the guardian of the Sky, who is ranked second. No wonder he is so arrogant and dares to act like a tyrant in the Sky sword martial arts," Nietian said cold as his eyes narrowed slightly. With the support of a guardian for a father, it was no wonder that Yangsun was so arrogant and tyrannical. "Nietian, aren't you afraid of Yang Gongri's revenge?" The Sixth Sky looked at Nietian and asked with a frown. He originally wanted to remind Nietian of Yang Gongri's terrifying power, but he didn't expect Nietian to lament. "The Sixth Sky isn't afraid, so why should I be afraid?" Nietian smiled faintly, and the corners of his mouth curled into a strange arc. The Sixth Sky openly helped Nietian, which was undoubtedly going against Yang Gongri. However, the Sixth Sky wasn't afraid, which was enough to show that he had something to rely on. Although Hao Qianduwu had warned the 10,000 swords not to divulge what had happened in the valley, his threat was clearly useless. Some of the 10,000 swords would definitely tell Yang Gongri about what had happened. At that time, Yang Gongri would not only want to take revenge on Nietian. "Nietian, you are indeed very smart," the Sixth Sky said with a gloomy face when he heard Nietian's words. "The Sixth Sky, I want to know, why are you helping me?" Nietian's mouth twitched as he looked at the Sixth Sky and asked. He didn't believe that the Sixth Sky could openly go against Yang Gongri just because he admired him. The Sixth Sky had also said that Yang Gongri could kill him as easily as killing an ant. Helping Nietian was equivalent to risking his life. Sixth Haoyan looked at Nietian, his eyes trembling. After a moment of hesitation, he said, "I was entrusted by someone. The intelligence of Nyetian was far beyond his expectations, which surprised him. Nyetian's pupils constricted as a surprised expression appeared on his face. Someone entrusted you with this task. The six guy's words were so vague that he obviously didn't want to reveal the identity of the person behind it. Throughout the entire sky, sword marshal, only the guardian of the sky could command the sixth sky. And the only guardian of the sky that Nyetian knew was eternally merciless. Moreover, it was eternally merciless intention for him to enter the sword marshal in the sky. The person behind the sixth sky, could it be eternally merciless? Nyetian frowned and thought to himself, don't guess. That person doesn't want to show up yet. The sixth sky knew that Nyetian was guessing, so he said directly, I can only tell you that the person who asked me to protect you is not eternally merciless. Yes, Nyetian nodded. Then he turned his eyes and said, Lord Sixth Sky, you didn't ask me to come here just to tell me this, did you? I have something for you. The sixth sky's eyes flickered. Then he took out a scroll and threw it to Nyetian. Oh! Nyetian grabbed the scroll and sent his divine sense into it. He sensed a very familiar aura, which made his expression flicker involuntarily. He couldn't help but exclaim in astonishment. This aura is the tripartite holy formation. The scroll in his hand was a formation array scroll, and the aura of the formation was clearly the Trinity sacred array. Nyetian had once practiced cultivation in the tripartite sacred formation. Back when he was in the sacred heaven sword tomb in the abandoned land, he met a star emissary, the sacred heaven ancestor. It was the sacred heaven ancestor who allowed him to enter the Trinity sacred array and comprehend the sacred heaven defying sword. At this moment, he actually felt the aura of the Trinity sacred array in a formation array scroll. How could not be shocked? The Trinity sacred array was a connate sacred array nurtured by heaven and earth. Why would it appear in a formation array scroll? Chapter 33:41. Chapter 336. Eternal night burning. God Nyetian thought about the Trigri sacred formation and the sacred heaven ancestor and couldn't help but suspect that the sixth sky in front of him was related to the sacred heaven ancestor. He even felt that the person behind the sixth sky was the sacred heaven ancestor. Back then, the sacred heaven ancestor left behind a sacred heaven sword soul and then left the abandoned land. It was not impossible to say that the sacred heaven ancestor was a protector of the sky. Nyetian, the formation scroll in your hand is not the Trigri sacred formation. While Nyetian was still in shock, the Ghost Emperor opened his mouth and said, this should be a sword formation scroll. The sword formation inside is derived from the Trigri sacred formation. Not the Trigri sacred formation? Nyetian's eyes became serious after hearing the Ghost Emperor's words and exclaimed. He was just wondering why the Trigri sacred formation would appear on a scroll since it was a natural formation. So it turned out that the scroll in his hand was only a sword formation scroll derived from the Trigri sacred formation. Nyetian, this scroll was given to you by that Great One. I hope that you can use it well and improve your control over the sword intent. At this time, the sixth guy looked at Nyetian and said, you are the swordsman with the strongest sword intent that this sky has ever seen among swordsmen of the same rank. Your control and usage of the sword intent also far surpasses swordsmen of the same rank, but is still far from enough. This sword formation can help you improve your understanding of the sword intent, allowing you to control it more freely and unleash more power. Thank you. Nyetian faintly smiled and put the scroll away. However, he was still curious whether the sixth sky and the sacred heaven ancestor were related or not. Although the formation scroll in his hand was not the Trigri sacred formation, it was derived from the Trigri sacred formation. This meant that it was still related to the Trigri sacred formation. If the heavenly ancestor was really the protector of the sky, then it would truly be worth looking forward to. Nyetian, all the guardians are preparing for the opening of the sky sword seal, so you're safe for now. Sixth Sky looked at Nyetian and said, you have to seize the time to cultivate and improve your strength. On the day that the sword seal in the sky opens, Yang Gungri will definitely appear, and very soon, he will find out everything. At that time, the first person he will target will definitely be you. I understand. Nie Tian nodded slightly, his eyes filled with determination. Even in the Sky Sword martial arts, he was not afraid of any challenge. After leaving the sixth sky, Nie Tian quickly returned to the valley. At this point, he had already assumed the identity of Wan Jian. This entire valley was his. Nie Tian. Seeing that Nie Tian had returned, Emo Qianjun immediately walked over with a worried expression. He didn't know if it was a good or bad thing for the sixth guy to call Nie Tian away alone. Brother Emo, is Jiu Qinsheng all right? Nie Tian chuckled and asked Emo Qianjun. He has calmed down, but his mind is still not clear. I don't know if his divine sense can recover. Emo Qianjun frowned with an ugly expression. He was locked in the dungeon for 3 days and was also affected by the divine burning ghost curse. However, it was only for a short period of time, so the curse couldn't completely devour his divine sense. After Nie Tian helped him force out the divine burning ghost curse, his divine sense recovered. However, Jiu Qinsheng had been affected by the divine burning ghost curse for a long time, so whether or not his divine sense could recover was still unknown. Nie Tian frowned and came next to Jiu Qinsheng. The latter had already woken up, but his eyes were empty as if he was a fool. Nie Tian's expression was not good. If Jiu Qinsheng's divine sense couldn't recover, then what was the point of living? If his divine sense couldn't recover, Jiu Qinsheng would be no different from a walking corpse. However, Nie Tian really didn't know how to recover Jiu Qinsheng's divine sense. Nie Tian, the eternal night burning god in your hands is the key to recovering Jiu Qinsheng's divine sense. At this moment, the Ghost Emperor's excited voice rang out. Eternal night burning god. Nie Tian's eyes trembled as he immediately took out the mysterious black stone that he had brought out from the secret chamber. The moment the mysterious black stone appeared, an incomparably dark aura was released and filled the space. What a strong mental strength! In an instant, Nie Tian's divine sense felt a terrifying impact, which actually caused his divine sense to tremble. The power released by the eternal night burning god was actually a terrifying mental strength, which had a great impact on divine sense. Emo Qianjuan's body swayed, and his eyes glazed over for a long time before gradually returning to normal. His divine sense wasn't as strong as Nie Tian's. Under the impact of the eternal night burning god, his divine sense almost collapsed. When Nie Tian first saw the eternal night burning god, he had tried to probe it, and his divine sense had almost been devoured. There was no doubt that the eternal night burning god contained extremely strong mental strength. Moments later, Nie Tian calmed down a lot. Looking at the eternal night god of flame, he asked with a frown, "What in the world is this thing?" He really wanted to know what the eternal night burning god contained, and how it could contain such a strong mental strength. The eternal night burning god is a heart. The Ghost Emperor replied after a pause. Heart? Nie Tian's eyes trembled as he exclaimed. He never expected the mysterious black stone in his hand to be a heart. Yes. The Ghost Emperor nodded and said, according to the rumors, the eternal night burning god is the heart of one of the 9 ancient beasts, the eternal night demon fox. One of the 9 ancient beasts, the eternal night demon fox. Nie Tian's eyes trembled again when he heard the name. The 9 ancient beasts only exist in the legends. It is said that there are 9 powerful beasts that have the power to destroy the sacred realm. The Ghost Emperor's eyes darkened as he said, the eternal night demon fox is only one of the 9 beasts, but it possesses one of the strongest bloodlines of the beasts, the burning god bloodline. The burning god bloodline is an extremely rare mental strength bloodline. The most terrifying thing about this bloodline is that it can devour a person's divine sense in an instant. Nie Tian's eyes flickered when he heard the Ghost Emperor's words, and his expression changed. No wonder his divine sense was almost devoured when he tried to probe the eternal night burning god. However, it was his first time hearing about a mental strength bloodline. All the bloodlines he had seen before were bloodlines that could increase one's martial strength. There was no bloodline that could increase one's mental strength. Moreover, in his opinion, mental strength was an extremely limited power. According to his previous knowledge, the limit of a martial artist's mental strength was 100 steps. Therefore, it was extremely difficult to kill someone with mental strength. However, he could sense that the mental strength contained in the eternal night burning God was extremely powerful. No matter how strong one's divine sense was, they would be devoured instantly if they were caught in it. Nyetian, do you think that the limit of mental strength is 100 steps? The Ghost Emperor seemed to have guessed what Nyetian was thinking. He let out a strange laugh and asked, "Yes." Nyetian nodded and asked doubtfully, "Can it be increased after the mental strength exceeds 100 steps?" Chapter 3342. Chapter 337. The Limits of Spirit. Is the limit of spirit not 100 steps? Nyetian was stunned by the Ghost Emperor's question. He hadn't paid much attention to spirit power. After all, he had given up on alchemy and formations after reaching the deity realm and focused on martial and swordsmanship. However, the limit of spirit power he knew in the plane of existence was 100 steps. 100 steps is the limit of spirit power. That's only the understanding of spirit realm cultivators. The Ghost Emperor laughed and said, "In different worlds, the martial artist's understanding of the martial Tao is completely different. For example, a spirit realm cultivator believes that the limit of martial Tao is the deity realm, but a deity realm cultivator believes that the limit of martial Tao is the sage realm. As for sage realm cultivators, they have a different understanding of the limits of martial Tao. It's the same with spirit power. Due to the limitations of the world, the limit of a spirit realm cultivator is 100 steps. This leads to spirit realm cultivators believing that the limit of spirit power is only 100 steps. So that's how it is." Nyetian came to a realization and asked, "Then what's the limit of spirit power?" The Ghost Emperor frowned and said, "In the realms, the unit of mental power is trillions. 1 trillion is equivalent to 10 levels of mental power, and the limit of the martial practitioners in the realms is about 100 trillion. In the holy world, the unit of spirit power is ancient. 1 ancient is equivalent to 10 trillion or 100 steps of spirit power. The limit of a realm cultivator is around 100 ancient. As for the limit of spirit power, this emperor's current understanding is 100 ancient. 100 ancient." Nyetian's eyes flickered and he murmured in shock. 1 ancient is 10 trillion, and 1 trillion is 10 steps of spirit power. The limit of a holy world cultivator's spirit power is 10,000 steps. 10,000 steps. Nyetian's eyes narrowed, and his heart couldn't help but tremble. This number was too shocking. One had to know that in the plane of existence, a cultivator with dozens of steps of spirit power had terrifying perception. It was hard to imagine how terrifying the perception of a cultivator with 10,000 steps of spirit power would be. Nyetian guessed that a cultivator with 10,000 steps of spirit power could probably cover a large mountain range with their divine sense. Nyetian, do you know how powerful the perception of a cultivator with extreme spirit power is? The Ghost Emperor's lips twitched as he asked Nyetian. "I don't know." Nyetian shook his head and didn't say his guess. The Ghost Emperor chuckled and said, "If he unleashes his psychic power to its fullest, he can sense a small realm." This. Nyetian's eyes flickered with shock. His face stiffened, and he couldn't utter a word for a long time. A small realm was at least tens of thousands of kilometers in circumference. Such a martial artist was too frightening. However, even in the saint's world, there should only be a handful of cultivators who possessed extreme mental strength. Spirit Emperor, saint is of spirit, of soul spirit, of spirit. Spirit, the Ghost Emperor used to be a formation master, so his spirit power should be very strong. The Ghost Emperor smiled and said, "Around 60. Only 60. Nyetian frowned and couldn't help but feel disappointed. He originally thought that the Ghost Emperor's spirit power would be at least 80 or 90, if not 100. Who would have thought that it would be 60? Stinking brat. Do you think having spiritual power in the 60s is easy? The Ghost Emperor became angry when he heard Nietion's disappointment. In the all-heaven sacred world, the number of people with spirit power above this emperor's can be counted on 2 hands. Nietion's expression changed slightly. He paused for a moment before frowning and saying, "Then you people from the saints' world are too useless." You. The Ghost Emperor was so angry that he couldn't say anything. If he had a body of flesh and blood, he would have vomited blood already. At that moment, Nietion's eyes suddenly flickered, and he asked excitedly, "Ghost Emperor, what's the grade of my psychic power now?" He felt that as his strength increased, his spirit power should have become stronger as well. His perception was also very strong. Therefore, he really wanted to know how much spirit power he had right now. It should be around 40 trillion. The Ghost Emperor calmed down a little and said in a bad mood, 40 trillion. Nietion's eyes flickered with excitement. He didn't expect his spirit power to be so strong. He had never cultivated spirit power after reaching the godly realm. So it was indeed unexpected that he could have 40 trillion spirit power. It's indeed rare for you to have 40 trillion spirit power without cultivating. The Ghost Emperor calmed down and said, "Normally, even if a cultivator doesn't cultivate spirit power, their spirit power will slowly increase as their strength increases. Therefore, most godly realm cultivators have 10 to 20 trillion spirit power. And you, when you were at the soul realm, you focused on cultivating spirit power and fused with the holographic divine glyph. With the addition of the star energy in your body, your spirit power has greatly increased. Also, your eyes have great perception, which also stimulated the growth of your spirit power. That's why you have 20 trillion spirit power. No wonder I feel that my perception is much stronger than when I was at the soul realm. When my divine sense is completely spread out, I can clearly sense everything within 100,000 meters." Nietion's lips curled up into a smile. "Your spirit power is nothing in front of a true spirit master." The Ghost Emperor curled his lips and sneered. "All right." Nietion smiled helplessly. He then thought of something and said, "Ghost Emperor, you said that the eternal night burning god is the key to helping Jiu Qiansheng recover his divine sense. What do you mean?" The Ghost Emperor frowned and asked, "Nietion, you saw so many swordsmen in the secret chamber. All of them died, and their divine senses were devoured. Where do you think their divine sense went?" The Ghost Emperor asked with a frown. Nietion went blank for a moment, confusion filling his face. Wasn't their soul awareness devoured by the ghost-burning curse? What about the soul-burning ghost curse? The Ghost Emperor asked with a strange laugh. Nietion's eyes narrowed as he thought of something. His expression changed as he blurted out in shock. Could it be that the eternal night burning god absorbed the power of the soul-burning ghost curse? The skeletons and the power of the god-burning ghost curse that Nietion had seen in the underground dungeon were all gone. He didn't pay much attention to it before, but now that he thought about it, it was even stranger. Someone had used the soul-burning ghost curse to devour the divine sense of the swordsman. There must be a reason. When he thought about the altar where he found the eternal night burning god, Nietion realized that the power of the soul-burning ghost curse had been absorbed by the eternal night burning god. Yes. The Ghost Emperor nodded and said, "The divine sense of the dead swordsman was absorbed by the soul-burning ghost curse, and the soul-burning ghost curse was used to nourish the eternal night burning god." This. Nietion was shocked. He was stunned for a moment before he reacted and asked with a trembling voice, "What is the person behind this doing? Using so many soul-burning ghost curses to nourish the eternal night burning god. The person behind this must have an ulterior motive." Chapter 3343. Binding Technique with Blood. Nietion stared blankly for a few seconds before he came to his senses and asked in astonishment, "Eternal night burning god? Resurrection?" He did not understand what the Ghost Emperor meant by resurrecting the eternal night burning god. The eternal night burning god is the heart of the eternal night demon fox. The Ghost Emperor's eyes trembled as he said, "Legend has it that the 9 great primordial demon beasts are immortal. The eternal night demon fox with the bloodline of the burning god might have perished, but its heart was preserved. In ancient times, an expert predicted that the eternal night demon fox could be resurrected with the help of the eternal night burning god's heart. This." Nyetian frowned. He was stunned and could not speak for a long time. It was unbelievable that a powerful beast could be resurrected with the help of its own heart. "Nyetan, I know it's hard for you to accept this," the Ghost Emperor continued. "Before this emperor also thought that it was impossible. I even thought that the 9 great ancient beasts were just a myth. Perhaps they didn't even exist. However, the eternal night burning god is an undeniable fact." The Ghost Emperor's eyes trembled as he spoke, as if he was thinking about something else. He had a strange look on his face. "Then how can I use the eternal night burning god to restore Zhou Qiansheng's consciousness?" Nyetian asked after he calmed down. "The consciousness that the eternal night burning god devours won't disappear immediately. It will exist in the eternal night burning god for a long time." The Ghost Emperor's eyes sank as he said, "Zhou Qiansheng's consciousness was devoured not long ago. It should be perfectly preserved in the eternal night burning god. As long as you can extract his consciousness from the eternal night burning god and guide it back into his soul, he will be able to recover." Nyetian's eyes trembled when he heard the Ghost Emperor's words. His expression became extremely unsightly. He had personally experienced the power of the eternal night burning god twice. His consciousness had almost collapsed. The Ghost Emperor wanted him to extract Zhou Qiansheng's divine sense from the eternal night burning god. Was this a joke? With Nyetian's measly 40 trillion spiritual force, once he entered the eternal night burning god, his divine sense would be instantly devoured. How could he talk about stripping Zhou Qiansheng's divine sense? "Nyetian, if you want your divine sense to safely enter the eternal night burning god, you must first become the master of the eternal night burning god," the Ghost Emperor said solemnly, his eyes shining with a blazing light. "Become the master of the eternal night burning god." Nyetian's eyes trembled, and his expression froze. "Yes." The Ghost Emperor nodded heavily and said, "Bind it with your blood." "Ghost Emperor, are you saying that I should nourish the eternal night burning god with my blood and make it recognize me as its master?" Nyetian's eyes trembled, and his voice was filled with excitement. "Yes." Ghost Monarch nodded with a strange light surging in his eyes. "The eternal night burning god has been asleep for a very long time. A powerful bloodline is needed to awaken it, and your bloodline power should be able to awaken the eternal night burning god. As long as you can awaken the eternal night burning god, it is equivalent to using your bloodline power to set up a bloodline restriction on the eternal night burning god. The eternal night burning god must recognize you as its master." Nyetian's eyes trembled, and his expression froze for a moment. The resurrection of the eternal night burning god meant that the eternal night demon fox had resurrected. The eternal night demon fox was one of the legendary 9 great demon beasts of the ancient times. Its power was unimaginable. Could Nyetian really control such a terrifying demon beast? Nyetian, the eternal night demon fox, is one of the 9 great demon beasts. "It is worth a try," the Ghost Emperor said with a blazing gaze. It was obvious that he was egging Nyetian on. "Okay." Nyetian's eyes trembled, but he did not hesitate and nodded heavily. He wanted the eternal night burning god to recognize him as its master, not because of the eternal night demon fox's power, but because he had to help Zhou Qiansheng recover his divine sense. For Zhou Qiansheng, he was willing to try. "Brother Nya, what are you trying to do?" Mo Qianjun could not help but ask when he saw Nyetian's expression change several times and the blazing gaze in his eyes. "Zhou Qiansheng's divine sense is trapped in this mysterious black stone." Nyetian looked at the eternal night burning god and said, "If you want to help Zhou Qiansheng recover his divine sense, you have to start with this mysterious black stone. HM? Mo Qianjun was stunned when he heard Nie Tian's words. He could not react in time. Brother Mo, take Zhu Qiansheng away from the valley first. I have something to do. Nie Tian did not explain too much to Mo Qianjun. He asked him to take Zhu Qiansheng away first. He did not know what was going to happen next. Given how terrifying the eternal night burning god was, if it unleashed a powerful mental attack, Mo Qianjun's divine sense would instantly collapse. Mo Qianjun was confused, but he did not ask too much. He took Zhu Qiansheng away for the time being. Nie Tian sensed that Mo Qianjun and Mo Qianjun were far enough away. He took a deep breath and moved his finger. A drop of blood spurted out from his fingertip and landed on the eternal night burning god. The drop of blood was instantly absorbed by the eternal night burning god. Nie Tian's eyes trembled. He guarded his mind and was so nervous that beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. However, nothing happened to the eternal night burning god, even after he waited for a long time. Nie Tian was stunned. He murmured, "Is it because my bloodline power is not strong enough? Let's try again." Then, he let out a long breath to calm himself down. Another drop of blood dripped from his fingertip and entered the eternal night burning god. However, the eternal night burning god still did not move. It doesn't seem to work. Nie Tian shook his head. His expression was ugly. He had thought that something terrible would happen next. Who knew that his bloodline power was not strong enough to awaken the eternal night burning god? I'll have to think of something else. After a long time, Nie Tian sighed and prepared to put away the eternal night burning god. Nie Tian, try using the blood from your eyes. The Ghost Emperor did not give up and reminded Nie Tian. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment, but he immediately understood what the Ghost Emperor meant. Nie Tian's strongest bloodline power was the god-fiend nascent embryo. Right now, the only things that had awakened in his body were his eyes. His right eye was the demon eye, and his left eye was the heavenly punishment godly reverse. Therefore, the strongest part of his blood that contained bloodline power was his eyes. Without the slightest hesitation, 2 drops of blood-colored tears rolled down his cheeks and fell into the eternal night burning god. However, the eternal night burning god still did not move after the 2 drops of blood fell. It was as if the eternal night burning god was just an ordinary rock. There was nothing special about it. It still doesn't work. Nie Tian shook his head. He could not hide the disappointment on his face. Even his bloodline power could not awaken the eternal night burning god. He did not know what kind of bloodline could awaken the eternal night burning god. The god-fiend nascent embryo is the #1 forbidden bloodline. Why can't it awaken the eternal night burning god? The Ghost Emperor was confused, but there was more disappointment in his eyes. The eternal night demon fox was one of the supreme ancient 9 monsters. It was a pity that it could not be awakened. Perhaps Nie Tian is not strong enough and cannot use the bloodline power to its fullest. The Ghost Emperor sighed and guessed. Nie Tian had a helpless expression and prepared to put away the eternal night burning god. Crack! But at this moment, above the eternal night burning god, a crisp sound rang out. It was extremely strange. Chapter 33:44. Chapter 3:39. Demon Fox of Eternal Night. Nie Tian's pupils shrank involuntarily as he saw a crack appear on the eternal night burning god, and his nerves instantly tensed up. Following that, another crisp sound rang out, and the tiny crack on the eternal night burning god expanded slightly. "This!" Nie Tian exclaimed in shock, and his face became lifeless. He did not dare to probe the eternal night flaming god with his divine sense, but he could sense that the eternal night flaming god was releasing a powerful aura of life. That's right, it was the aura of life. It was as if a life was being nurtured inside the eternal night flaming god, and it was a life with extremely strong vitality. Nie Tian continued to nourish the eternal night flaming god with the blood of the eyes. The Ghost Emperor's excited voice rang out. He was practically shouting at Nie Tian. Nie Tian answered. Then drops of bloody tears flowed out of his eyes and dropped into the eternal night, flaming God. Pa! Pa! Crack! The eternal night, flaming God, absorbed the blood of the demon I, and heavenly punishment, heavenly punishment. A series of crisp sounds rang out as tiny cracks appeared on the surface of the eternal night, flaming God. Nyetion felt an even stronger aura of life. His eyes trembled uncontrollably. His heart was in his throat. He was extremely nervous. At this moment, eternal night, burning God was like a cracked egg. As for what would appear when the egg broke, no one knew. However, although the cracks had appeared on the eternal night, flaming God, they were very small and not enough to cause it to crack open. However, the little fellow inside seemed to be unable to wait any longer. It was continuously releasing bursts of tremendous life aura. The powerful aura of life circulated in the air, causing the space around it to tremble slightly. It was extremely terrifying. Nyetion frowned. Blood continued to flow out of his eyes as it entered the eternal night, flaming God. A moment later, bean-sized beads of sweat appeared on his forehead, and his face became much paler. He did not expect the palm-sized eternal night, flaming God, to absorb so much blood. It was as if the eternal night, flaming God, was an endless abyss of blood. Crack! 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 Following that, cracks continuously appeared on the eternal night, burning God, but it did not split open. Nyetion's eyes trembled as anxiety filled his heart. After losing too much blood, his eyesight was already somewhat blurry. If the eternal night, burning God, continued to absorb his blood, he would truly run out of blood. Nyetion, don't worry. You must hold on. The Ghost Emperor knew that Nyetion was anxious and reminded him. Although he said that, he was actually more anxious than Nyetion. But since they had already come this far, they absolutely could not give up halfway. And Nyetion nodded his head heavily. His eyes were filled with determination. Bang! At that instant, a dull thud could be heard. A gap appeared on the eternal night, blazing God, and a tremendous life aura was emitted from it. Nyetion's eyes trembled, and he looked extremely shocked. He had only sensed such a boundless life force in the star Origin Stone before it was unsealed. Bang! The enormous aura of life formed an invisible ripple in the air, surging out in all directions, instantly spreading throughout the entire clear sky, sword martial technique. At this moment, the expressions of all the swordsmen in the clear sky sword martial technique turned sluggish, and their expressions changed. They were dumbfounded, as if they were in some kind of illusion. Bang! 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 At the same time, more gaps appeared on the eternal night, blazing God. Finally, they connected into a slightly larger gap. Nyetion looked at the gap. What he saw caused his eyes to tremble, and his entire body froze. From the gap, a small furry paw reached out. It was very small, about the size of a normal person's finger. Furthermore, the furry paw was golden in color. It was eye-catching, and it made one feel like they were in a bright atmosphere. Puff! While Nyetion was still in a daze, another furry little paw reached out. Following that, a small head appeared. It looked very similar to a fox, but its ears were very big, and it looked extremely cute. The moment the furry little beast came out, the first thing it saw was Nyetion's shocked expression. Its emerald eyes twinkled, and its little head shook, as if it was observing Nyetion. Gulp! Nyetion took a long time to react. He could not help but gulp, and his face was still a little dazed. He murmured, "This is the Eternal Night Demon Fox." The Eternal Night Demon Fox, one of the legendary 9 great primordial demonic beasts, was actually such a terrifying little fox? Nyetion could not connect the little thing in front of him with the 9 great primordial demonic beasts. Squeak! At that moment, the little thing cried out, and a red light flashed in its eyes. Then it leaped, and like a golden bolt of lightning, it directly landed on Nyetion's face. The little thing's entire body was about the size of a child's fist. Its furry little paw was soft and firmly clasped onto Nyetion's face. Then the little thing's little paw came out, and like a finger, it scratched Nietion's face back and forth. It even stuck out its tongue from time to time, licking Nietion's face until it was burning hot. Nietion frowned, and then he could not help but laugh. He had worked hard for half a day. Could it be that he had gotten a little pet that only knew how to act cute? Little thing, are you really the eternal night demon fox? Nietion reached out and held the little thing in his palm and carefully observed it. Its whole body was golden, and it looked dazzling. However, there was a tuft of scarlet hair on its forehead, like a flame branded on its forehead. Nietion sensed a terrifying spiritual fluctuation from the scarlet hair, as if there was an abyss of spiritual power hidden under the scarlet hair. Nietion, this is really the eternal night demon fox, and it's a newborn cub. It can accompany you and grow together. The Ghost Emperor's voice sounded, and it was trembling slightly, but it was barely able to maintain its composure. He did not expect that the eternal night burning god would give birth to a cub. Could this be how the eternal night demon fox maintained its immortality? It was reborn again and reincarnated without dying. This, yet Tion frowned, and his expression was a little ugly. He did not have time to wait for the eternal night demon fox to grow up. He still needed the eternal night demon fox to recover its 9,000 years of divine sense. Squeak, squeak. At this time, the eternal night demon fox began to cry, as if it had sensed something. Its little face looked aggrieved, and its green eyes stared at Nietion, looking delicate and pitiful. What's going on? Nietion was stunned. He did not understand why the eternal night demon fox had suddenly cried out. Cough, cough. At this time, the Ghost Emperor coughed and said, Nietion, it might be hungry. Hungry? Nietion was taken aback for a moment, and his face darkened. The eternal night demon fox had just been born, and it had not done anything yet. And it was already hungry? What does it want to eat? Nietion became cold and asked with a frown. The Ghost Emperor smiled bitterly and said, Right now, the nine-tailed demon fox is still in the infant stage. It can only eat to awaken its power, which is your blood. You want me to feed it with my blood? Nietion's expression darkened, and he looked at the eternal night demon fox and cried out, If you wanted to live, you have to do this first. The Ghost Emperor looked helpless, and then his eyes flickered. He suddenly said, Take out the scroll of the three-talent sword formation and test the little demon fox's ability. Nietion was confused, but he still took out the sword formation scroll and placed it in front of the little demon fox. The little demon fox's eyes flickered, like a child who had found a new toy. It temporarily forgot about its hunger and reached out with its little claws to touch the sword formation scroll. At this time, a strange scene happened. Chapter 33:45. Sword Array Trial. The sudden scene caused Nietion to be abruptly stunned. His expression froze, and he couldn't react for a long time. Why did the image of the entire sword array appear in his divine sense when the little demon fox touched the sword array scroll? What was going on? What powerful senses? The Ghost Emperor's face sank, and he couldn't help but let out a cry of astonishment. Ghost Emperor, why did a sword formation appear in my divine sense? Nietion became cold and asked the Ghost Emperor. It's simple. The Ghost Emperor seemed a little excited and said proudly, The little demon fox was awakened by your bloodline power, which means you left a bloodline imprint in its body. It's like a soul contract. Your souls can resonate, which means that your souls are connected. To put it simply, whatever it perceives can directly appear in your consciousness. I think I understand now. Before the Ghost Emperor could finish, Nietion's eyes flickered as he said, So you're saying that the image of the sword formation in my soul awareness was sensed by the eternal night fox, and that I'm connected to its soul? That's why it sensed the sword formation in my soul awareness. Really? The Ghost Emperor nodded and said, You should know how terrifying this little demon fox is now. It didn't even open the scroll. Just by touching it, it could sense the sword array in the scroll. Such perception is comparable to those saint formation masters in the sacred world. Indeed, Nietion gulped and couldn't help but nod. The tripartite sword formation was very complicated. Although it had evolved from the tripartite sacred formation, it was definitely a high-level god formation. The little fox immediately sensed the structure of the array. It was indeed terrifying. Most importantly, the little demon fox had just been born. Its current sensory ability was definitely not its limit. Yeah. Just as Nyetian was in a state of shock, the little demon fox started to get tired of the sword array scroll. She turned to look at him and started to cry out. Nyetian frowned and smiled wryly. Without hesitation, blood spurted out of his fingertip and the little demon fox started to suck. After a while, the little demon fox's belly was full. It finally stopped, stretched, and fell asleep on Nyetian's palm. Nyetian looked at the sleeping little demonic fox and couldn't help but laugh. This little fellow is quite cheerful. It sleeps after eating. Then, Nyetian took a deep breath and activated his divine sense to sense the eternal night demon fox's divine soul. His divine sense was connected with the eternal night demon fox's, so he didn't have to worry about it. He found that the eternal night demonic fox's spirit space was very vast, like a vast ocean. In this vast spirit space, only a very small part of the space was bright. The rest of the space was dark and chaotic. He wanted to find the 9 Qianxing's Geo soul. After a while, Nyetian was covered in cold sweat. He had to withdraw his divine soul. Nyetian, don't be too anxious. Geo Qianxing's divine soul is only buried in the little demon fox's divine soul. You have to get used to the little demon fox's divine soul first before you can enter the divine soul. The Ghost Emperor knew what Nyetian was thinking and said in a low voice. Yes. Nyetian nodded. That was the only thing he could do now. Nyetian, what happened here? At this time, Mo Qianjun came back with Jiu Qianxing. He looked at Nyetian in confusion. His eyes were dull, and he looked very tired. Nothing. Nyetian smiled and asked, Brother Mo, are you okay? I'm fine. Mo Qianjun shook his head. He felt a little dizzy and said, I don't know what happened just now. It seems that I lost a part of my memory. Nyetian's eyebrows furrowed as he speculated that the eternal night fox's life fluctuations, which carried psychic impacts, must have affected Mo Qianjuan's soul awareness to some extent. In fact, it wasn't just Jiu Qianxing. All the swordsmen in the sky fell into an environment when the eternal night fox was born. Just now, everyone came to their senses, but they couldn't remember what had happened. Then, Nyetian briefly explained what had happened to Jiu Qianxing. Finally, he said, Brother Mo, I'll have to trouble you to take care of Jiu Qianxing for the time being. I'll find his soul awareness as soon as possible. Yes. Mo Qianjun nodded and didn't say anything else. There was still a long time before the opening of the sword seal in the sky. Nyetian planned to use this time to comprehend the 3 Greats sword formation and improve his understanding and control of the sword will. His current level of sword principle had reached a bottleneck. It would be difficult for him to improve it in a short time. Therefore, the way to improve his strength was to strengthen his understanding of the sword will. Six Sky was able to defeat Niet Tian in the state of transcendence ultimacy with his transcendent sword soul. This showed the importance of understanding the sword will to a swordsman. As long as Niet Tian's understanding and control of the sword will could improve, he would be able to easily fight against swordsmen with sword charm. Niet Tian opened the scroll of the 3 Great Sword Formation and released a huge sword formation that instantly covered the entire valley. Next, he and Mo Qianjun stayed in the sword formation to comprehend, practice, and continuously hone their sword will. In the blink of an eye, more than 20 days had passed. In the middle of the valley, 2 figures were floating in the air, emanating fierce sword intent. They were Niet Tian and Mo Qianjun. At this moment, the 2 of them were competing in sword will. After more than 20 days of cultivation, Mo Qianjuan's sword principle had broken through to the transcendence ultimacy realm, which was 1 realm higher than Niet Tian's. However, his martial art cultivation was still at the rank 5 pseudo-sage realm. Mo Qianjun had been stuck in the transcendent sword body for a long time. This time, he was able to break through thanks to the 3 Great Sword Formation. Brother Mo, make your move. Niet Tian looked at Mo Qianjun and said with a faint smile. Although his sword principle realm did not improve, his understanding of sword will had greatly improved. He was confident that he could use the sword will of the transcendent sword body to fight against Mo Qianjuan's transcendence ultimacy sword will. All right, then I won't stand on ceremony. The corner of Mo Qianjuan's mouth twitched slightly. Then he moved and slashed across the sky with the infinite sky. An extreme sword will appeared and whistled in the air, attacking Nietian. Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he also stabbed out with his sword. Bang! In the void, the two sword wills collided and shattered at the same time. Nietian and Mo Qianjun took a few steps back at the same time, and then stabilized themselves at the same time. Mo Qianjun put away his long sword and couldn't help but smile bitterly. I lost. He used the Transcendence Ultimacy to compete with Nietian's Transcendent Sword Body. He had the advantage in the first place, but the result was a draw, which was equivalent to losing. Moreover, he knew that Nietian had not used his full strength at all. He had been holding on to his sword will. Brother Mo, your sword intent isn't weak. It's just that you still need to comprehend more about it. Nietian smiled and nodded. Don't worry, I won't let you leave me too far behind. Mo Qianjun laughed heartily and said loudly. He was shocked by Nietian's growth, but he would not belittle himself. Instead, he would catch up. Yeah, Nietian smiled and nodded. Then he heard the demon fox of eternal night call out. Chapter 33:46. The opening in the sky. This is the scene that the little demon fox sensed. Nietian's eyes trembled as he saw the shadow of the giant's sword in his divine sense becoming clearer and clearer, as if it was really descending. In the next moment, he suddenly turned around and saw the shadow of a giant sword appear high up in the sky. It actually directly tore through the void and released a tremendous amount of sword chi, forming a violent wave of air in the sky. It was extremely terrifying, crashing into the void. This scene was like a giant hidden in the void suddenly falling down with a giant sword, tearing the sky apart. The boundless and majestic sword intent released a terrifying aura, causing one to feel a suffocating sense of oppression. The giant sword was the color of blood. The moment it fell, it seemed as if the sky had been torn open. The crimson sword will filled the sky and dyed the earth red, like the sunset. The swordsmen in the sky raised their heads and looked at the sky. The shock in their hearts was indescribable. Their eyes were trembling in disbelief and disbelief. The crimson shadow of the sword was an existence that shocked the heavens and earth. Under the pressure of the enormous sword will, even the heavens and earth seemed to become small. In the valley, Mo Qianjun looked at the crimson shadow of the sword with a dull expression. His mouth was wide open, but he could not make a sound. One could imagine the shock in his heart. Nietian's face was stiff. After a long time, he finally reacted and murmured, "Is this the sword seal in the sky?" At this moment, the crowd also reacted and began to discuss. So the legendary sword seal in the sky is actually so powerful. Oh my God, I can't believe I can see the sword seal in the sky. Even if I die, it will be worth it. The aura of the sword seal in the sky is so strong. How much sword will is contained in the sword seal? The crowd was shocked. They were very glad that they could see the sword seal in the sky. Such a powerful sword seal, such an enormous sword will. As a swordsman, it was hard to imagine the shock in his heart when he saw it with his own eyes. The crimson shadow of the sword that broke through the sky was the sword seal in the sky. Buzz. At this time, the sword seal in the sky slowly descended and finally floated in the air, emitting a sonorous sword cry, like the cry of a crane, the sound of a great bell, surging in the void, lasting for a long time. At this moment, everyone felt that the sword will within their bodies was actually leaping about, as if it had been stimulated or resonated with something. I broke through. A moment later, a voice suddenly rang out. A swordsman shouted like a madman. He was very excited because his sword Dao realm had actually broken through. I also broke through. I also broke through. Following that, more and more excited voices rang out. The crowd seemed to have gone crazy, falling into a kind of carnival. Most of the swordsmen in the sky, sword martial artists, had been stimulated by the sword seal in the sky and achieved a breakthrough in their sword principles. Only an extremely small number of people, although the sword intent within their bodies was active, did not increase their cultivation level. Unfortunately, both Nie Tian and Mo Qianjun belonged to this minority. Nie Tian's sword will was too strong, and the stimulation of the sword seal in the sky was not enough for him to break through. As for Mo Qianjun, he had just broken through not long ago and was in the transition between the ultimacy of transcendence to the sword principles of the sage realm. This was the biggest bottleneck for a swordsman, so it was normal that he could not break through. On the other hand, Jiu Qiansheng, who was below, had a miraculous breakthrough. There was a trace of light in his dull eyes. Nie Tian did not pay attention to the others. His eyes were shining as he stared at the sword seal in the sky with a burning gaze. The sword shadow in the sky hung in the void. It was as red as blood, and it was dazzling. The divine sword was tens of thousands of meters long, and it stood there like a pillar of blood that reached the sky. Outside the sword seal in the sky, there was a layer of mysterious power that flowed like blood-colored runes, constantly surging and releasing waves of sword aura. Nie Tian only looked at the sword seal in the sky, and he felt the sword will in his body become active, making him extremely excited, and his blood was boiling. It was unimaginable how much sword will was contained in the sword seal in the sky. He did not know what the sword seal in the sky was, nor did he know what it meant for the swordsman in the sky. However, from the fanatical looks on everyone's faces, it seemed that the sword seal in the sky was something very terrifying. At this moment, everyone soared into the sky one after another and flew towards the sky. Soon, a large number of swordsmen gathered under the sword seal in the sky. Everyone looked at the sword seal in the sky and felt the aura of the sword seal at close range. They were even more shocked. However, most of them knew that they could only watch. Only an extremely small number of people could actually enter the sword seal in the sky. Brother Mo, take Jiu Qiansheng with you. Let's go and take a look. Nie Tian frowned slightly and said with a faint smile, "All right." Mo Qianjun agreed and waved at Jiu Qiansheng. The latter moved and came to his side. During this period of time, Mo Qianjun and Jiu Qiansheng had established a tacit understanding. Therefore, even though Jiu Qiansheng's divine consciousness had not recovered, he still trusted Mo Qianjun. Nie Tian and the other two quickly arrived in the sky. They were able to observe the sword seal in the sky at close range. When the others saw Jiu Qiansheng's appearance, they all avoided him. They all looked very disgusted. However, they seemed to be in awe of Nie Tian. From time to time, they glanced at Nie Tian with undisguised fear. Nie Tian did not care about them. He used his divine consciousness to feel the sword seal in the sky. He was even more shocked. Not only was the sword seal in the sky powerful, but it also seemed to have the aura of time and space. This meant that the sword seal in the sky had formed a world of its own. However, Nie Tian's mind power was limited. He could not sense what was inside the sword seal. He wanted the little fox demon to sense it, but the little fellow did not want to. Instead, her big eyes were shining. She seemed to be very interested in the swordsman in front of her. Although more than 20 days had passed, Nie Tian still had not found a suitable way to communicate with the little fox demon. What surprised him was that after such a long time, the little fox demon's body size had not grown at all. It was still the size of a small fist. It was very small. Nie Tian was even worried that the Evernight demonic fox would maintain such a large body size. At this moment, the little fox demon seemed to have sensed something and let out a strange cry. Nie Tian sensed something and turned around to look into the distance. What entered his sight were the figures of dozens of incomparably fierce swordsmen. These swordsmen looked very young, but they had a sharp aura. The weakest among them had reached the realm of the ultimate sword body. The stronger ones had reached the realm of sword rhyme. Nie Tian frowned. He could not help but feel strange. He did not know that there was such a group of young swordsmen in the Sky Sword Martialists. They're the Sword Star. Mo Qianjun could not help but say when he saw these people. Sword Star. Nie Tian was stunned. He did not know what this name meant in the Sky Sword Martialists. Chapter 3347. Chapter 342. Chapter 342 Like a mad dog, boom. The moment the black-robed swordsman appeared, the void suddenly sank and a terrifying pressure was released, causing people's hearts to tremble uncontrollably. The crowd's eyes froze, then locked onto the black-robed swordsman, their faces full of shock. Who is he? He's so powerful. His sword intent is so terrifying. It seems to be as fast as an expert like Wang Jian. He's so young. Could he be the legendary Sword Star? Sword Star, who is that? Rumor has it that all swordsmen who enter the Sky Sword Marshal can become Sword Stars if they are strong and talented. Sword Stars have a very special position in the Sky Sword Marshal. They don't need to mine sword intent, they only need to cultivate. I heard that Sword Stars can even use sword crystals. Using sword crystals. No wonder this person's sword principle is so terrifying. The crowd discussed, one after another, looking at the black-robed swordsman with jealousy, admiration, and fear. They were right. This black-robed swordsman was a sword star, and the dozens of swordsmen behind him were also sword stars. The so-called sword stars were the stars of swords. Just as one of them said, sword stars were swordsmen chosen by the guardians of the sky, sword marshal, and specially trained. Anyone who could enter the Sky Sword Marshal could be said to be a genius in sword principle, and sword stars were geniuses among geniuses. Sword stars didn't mind sword intent, they only focused on cultivation, and they could also enjoy sword crystals. With such a superior cultivation environment and outstanding talent, the sword star's sword Dao strength was generally much higher than that of ordinary swordsmen. The black-robed swordsman who stepped out looked very young, probably under 10,000 years old, but his sword principle realm was close to that of an expert like Wang Jian. One should know that there were only a few dozen Wang Jian in the entire Sky Sword Marshal. Nietan looked at the black-robed swordsman, the corners of his mouth twitching, and murmured, "The transcendent esoteric realm. At his age, he is indeed very strong to have reached such a realm." The black-robed swordsman deliberately released sword momentum, making everyone mistakenly think that he was very strong. He was indeed strong, but he was far from being strong to the point of being breathtaking. The black-robed swordsman was only at the transcendent, profound realm. He was much weaker than Wan Jianyang's son, who was at the second heaven of sword rhyme. Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly as he felt strange. Why would the black-robed swordsman come looking for him directly? He did not know the black-robed swordsman at all. He had never seen him before, but the latter had an aggressive look on his face. His eyes were sharp and fierce, as if he wanted to devour someone. "Who is Nietian? Show yourself." At this moment, the figure of the black-robed swordsman approached the crowd. With a low roar, his aura was domineering, and the sword intent around him was violent. "Nietian, this person is a sword star. He is very strong. We don't need to care about him." Mo Qianjun, who was behind Nietian, frowned and said in a low voice. He did not see the scene of Nietian killing Yang Sun and fighting to a draw with the Sixth Sky, so he was not clear about Nietian's real combat strength. In his opinion, Nietian's strength should be similar to that of the Thousand Swords, far from Wang Jian's level. The black-robed swordsman's aura was very strong, close to Wang Jian's strength. Therefore, he advised Nietian to ignore this person. "It doesn't matter. I'll just fight him and see what he wants." Nietian, on the other hand, faintly smiled. With a carefree look, he took a step forward and hovered in midair. He calmly looked at the black-robed swordsman and slightly raised his eyebrows in a provocative manner. "I am Nietian. Who are you?" "You are Nietian." The black-robed swordsman's eyes darkened and locked onto Nietian. He sneered and said, "My name is Liang Chao, a sword star under Master Six Sky. I'm ranked 88th on the sword ranking in the sky." Liang Chao was very arrogant. He stared at Nietian with his nose in the air and sneered, "I heard that you challenged Master Yang Sun and killed him. You even fought to a draw with Master Six Sky. I like to see how strong you are, the swordfish who killed Wang Jian and leveled the sky." "Oh." Nietian squinted his eyes and said with an awkward smile, "So, you're going to challenge me?" It had been more than 20 days since the incident that Liang Chao mentioned. The news of the sword marshals in the sky had long spread. Everyone was saying that a peerless swordsman had appeared in the sword marshals in the sky. He killed Wang Jian as a swordfish and even fought to a draw with the sixth sky. In an instant, Nie Tian's fame skyrocketed and he was in the limelight. Apparently, this sword star, named Liang Chao, wasn't convinced of Nie Tian's superiority and wanted to elevate his own status. It was a pity that Nie Tian was far more powerful than he had imagined. Challenge? Liang Chao sneered at Nie Tian's words and said, "Who do you think you are to make me challenge you? You're just a swordsman with a transcendent sword body. Are you sure you can take a blow from me?" "Oh." Nie Tian smiled again. The corner of his mouth moved slightly as he said, "So, you don't want to challenge me? You're a genius that I can't afford to provoke. I'll just hide from you. But please don't scream like a mad dog here and pollute my ears." With that, Nie Tian turned around and was about to leave. "Who are you calling a mad dog, brat?" Liang Chao was stunned at first, but then he reacted and roared. The sword essence all over his body burst out like a surging wave, crashing into the void. It was extremely terrifying. He was a dignified swordfish, an expert ranked 88th on the Sky Sword ranking. How could he not be angry when Nie Tian insulted him like a mad dog? Nie Tian froze for a moment before saying with a faint smile, not the slightest bit intimidated, "Whoever barks the loudest is a mad dog. You're courting death." Liang Chao was thoroughly enraged. With a loud roar, a long sword appeared in his hand, and he thrust it forward madly. Wherever the sword passed, flames would appear. In the blink of an eye, a sea of flames spread out in the air, pressing down on Nie Tian. "Oomph. In my opinion, you're the one who's courting death." Nie Tianling laughed. A gush of sword essence gushed out from his palm and instantly tore the flame apart, heading straight for Liang Chao. "Huh?" Seeing the flame in front of him suddenly burst, Liang Chao screamed in horror and panicked. Puff! In the next instant, he felt a sharp ray of light flying toward him, followed by a burning pain on his face. "Asshole! You've left a scar on my face." Liang Chao's pupils contracted as he reacted immediately. He became enraged and roared like a monkey. He did not expect Nie Tian to leave a scar on his face with a casual attack. The humiliation of a sword scar was the most direct and deepest insult to a swordsman. He could not believe that Nie Tian dared to humiliate him like this. At that instant, everyone's gaze froze and locked onto Liang Chao's face, staring at the glaring sword scar. Their gazes landed mercilessly on Liang Chao's face like a slap to the face. His body was boiling with anger. His eyes turned bloodshot and his body trembled uncontrollably, as if he was about to go berserk. Chapter 3348. Chapter 343, Ranking of Swords Boom. Liang Chao glared at Nie Tian with eyes that were spitting fire. The sword aura around his body rumbled and roared, looking extremely terrifying. However, Nie Tian remained calm and said with a smile, "Some people just want me to slap them. If I don't slap them, wouldn't I be embarrassing you?" "You!" Liang Chao roared. He wanted to say something, but he felt as if there was a huge rock pressing down on his chest, making him unable to make sound. "I advise you to calm down." Nie Tian smiled and said, "If you attack again, someone will die." "I puffed." Liang Chao's eyes trembled. He felt suffocated, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. How could not hear the threat in Nie Tian's words? He was arrogant, but he was not stupid. Just now, Nie Tian's casual sword aura had torn apart his fiery sword aura, making him realize that he was no match for Nie Tian. After all, Nie Tian hadn't even drawn his sword yet. Liang Chao could not understand why a swordsman with the ultimate sword physique was so terrifying. Nie Tian's sword aura was much stronger than Liang Chao's. Furthermore, his understanding and control of the sword aura were way above Liang Chao's, so it was normal for him to crush Liang Chao. Sword Star, the genius on the sky ranking of swords, is a mess. Nie Tianling laughed. He ignored Liang Chao and turned around to leave. He was already very kind to Liang Chao by only humiliating him. With his strength, He could easily kill Liang Chao with a single move. If he wanted to kill someone, Liang Chao would have been a corpse by now. Liang Chao's eyes trembled. He was unwilling to accept this, but he did not dare to attack Nie Tian again. Nie Tian's aura was too strong and domineering, making him fearful. If he dared to attack again, Nie Tian would really kill him. At this time, everyone's gazes shifted to Nie Tian. They were shocked. Nie Tian's strength had actually reached such a terrifying level. "Your name is Nie Tian, right?" At this moment, a deep voice sounded out all of a sudden. Following this, a figure appeared in the sky. Nie Tian felt a chill on his back, causing him to stop in his tracks. He turned around to look. The person who appeared in front of him was a green-clothed swordsman. His figure was tall and straight, and he had a handsome appearance. His entire person seemed to emit a fierce and extremely sharp aura. However, this person's eyes seemed to be very gloomy, giving him an extra evil aura. "What can I do for you?" Nie Tian smiled faintly. His soul consciousness moved slightly, and he was quite surprised. Although the green-clothed swordsman was deliberately restraining himself, he could still feel that the former's sword essence was extremely powerful and was not any weaker than Yang Sun's. This undoubtedly showed that this green-clothed swordsman was a swordsman who had stepped into the saint realm of the Sword Dao. The green-robed swordsman looked very young, even younger than Liang Chao. To have such strength at such a young age, it was enough to show how talented he was in the Sword Dao. "You once fought to a draw with the sixth guy. Is that true?" The green-clothed swordsman's eyes were like needles as he stared at Nie Tian, making Nie Tian feel very uncomfortable. "What does that have to do with you?" Nie Tian frowned and replied coldly. "My name is Li Yun, a disciple of the sixth guy. If you fought to a draw with my master, I'd like to know if you're a match for me." Lu Yun said in a deep voice, his eyes filled with killing intent. "Lu Yun. He's Lu Yun." The crowd suddenly became excited and exclaimed when they heard Lu Yun's words. Nie Tian frowned and could not help but laugh. It seemed that this Lu Yun was a famous swordsman in the sky. However, there was one thing that surprised Nie Tian. Lu Yun was a disciple of the sixth sky. At this moment, the crowd became even more excited and began to discuss among themselves. "Oh my God, so he's Lu Yun. He's indeed the disciple of the sixth sky. He's so strong. I heard that Lu Yun is a swordsman ranked 9th on the Sky Sword leaderboard. He's deliberately restraining his sword will, but he's still so strong. Lu Yun is looking for Nie Tian. This is going to be a great show for the disciple to avenge his master's humiliation." Many people's eyes lit up. They were obviously looking forward to the battle between Nie Tian and Lu Yun. Not only was Lu Yun a disciple of the sixth sky, but he was also ranked 9th on the Sky Sword leaderboard. One could imagine how strong he was. The Sky Sword leaderboard was a list of young swordsmen in the Sky Sword leaderboard who were under 10,000 years old. Swordsmen who were able to enter the Sky Sword leaderboard were all monstrous swordsmen who were 1 in a million. Take Liang Chao, for example. Although he was only ranked 88th on the Sky Sword leaderboard, his sword principle realm had already reached the amazing, god-surpassing ultimacy realm. However, he had provoked the even more monstrous Nie Tian, so he was completely defeated. Lu Yun was ranked 9th on the Sky Sword leaderboard. Liang Chao could not compare to him at all. Monstrous swordsmen like him were all arrogant people. His master, the sixth guy, had actually fought to a draw with Nie Tian. This undoubtedly made him feel humiliated. Although Nie Tian had displayed amazing combat strength, he was still not worthy of Lu Yun's attention. Today, whether it was to avenge his master's humiliation or to prove his strength, he had to defeat Nie Tian. "Are you looking down on me or Lord Six Guy by being so arrogant?" Nie Tian looked at Lu Yun and smiled slightly, but was very provocative. "You." Lu Yun's eyes darkened. He was momentarily speechless by Nie Tian's question. In any case, Nie Tian and the sixth guy had fought to a draw. Wasn't Lu Yun looking down on Nie Tian the same as looking down on the sixth guy? "Nie Tian, don't try to win with words." Lu Yun's face darkened. He released an extremely sharp aura from his body and said in a cold voice, "If you are a real swordsman, Then fight me. Is this a challenge? Yet Tion's lips twitched, his calm eyes filled with mockery. Yes, Lu Yun roared. The calmer Nye Tion was, the angrier he became. He said directly, Nye Tion, do you dare to accept my challenge? The crowd trembled when they heard Lu Yun's words. They all looked at Nye Tion, clearly hoping that Nye Tion would accept the challenge. One was the legend of Wan Jian, who was promoted from swordfish, and the other was a demon-like genius who was ranked 9th on the sword list of the sky. If these two were to fight, it would be very exciting. Nye Tion's eyes narrowed slightly, and a strange smile appeared on his face. Lu Yun's strength was far beyond Liang Chao's. If this battle started, he might have to use some tricks to win. The sword seal in the sky had already been activated, and Nye Tion did not want to reveal his strength too early. Moreover, Lu Yun was a disciple of the sixth sky. He did not want to fight this person. Nye Tion, are you afraid? Lu Yun laughed cold when he saw that Nye Tion did not answer. He said arrogantly, so the person who killed Yang Sun and fought to a draw with the sixth sky is a coward. Ha ha ha. His laughter immediately caused the crowd to roar with laughter. Everyone looked at Nye Tion with obvious disdain in their eyes. If that's the case, I have no choice but to fight. Nye Tion frowned and shook his head with a bitter smile. Chapter 3349. Boinya, I, Lu Yun, would like to see what kind of ability you, a super divine sword body, have to fight to a draw with my teacher. Lu Yun growled. His eyes were filled with a murderous glint as he condensed his sword will around his body, releasing a majestic aura. Nye Tion's eyes narrowed. Lu Yun's sword will aura was no weaker than Yang Sun's. In fact, it was even more terrifying. At such a young age, Lu Yun had already reached the Saint Realm. One could imagine how talented he was in swordsmanship. At this moment, Lu Yun was indeed a Saint Realm swordsman. Moreover, his swordsmanship had reached the third sky of sword charm, making him slightly stronger than Yang Sun. The crowd could feel the sword will fluctuations released by Lu Yun's sword will and could not help but tremble. This Lu Yun is indeed very strong. Such a terrifying sword will. I'm afraid he has already reached the sword charm realm. This guy named Nye Tion is definitely no match for Lu Yun. I think he will be killed by Lord Lu Yun in one move. Nye Tion will definitely lose, but Lu Yun may not dare to kill him. After all, he is now Wan Jian and is highly regarded by Lord Six Sky. The crowd discussed among themselves. They all believed that Nye Tion would definitely not be a match for Lu Yun. Lu Yun was very famous and was no less famous than Wan Jian. Although Nye Tion had fought to a draw with Six Sky, everyone knew that Six Sky had suppressed his swordsmanship realm. Therefore, even if it was a draw, it was not surprising. They even felt that Six Sky, who had suppressed his realm, was nothing to be afraid of. However, Nye Tion knew that an expert like Six Sky, even if he had suppressed his realm, his battle strength was still very terrifying. After all, some things, such as the comprehension of sword will, could not be suppressed. Boy, I, Lu Yun, only need one move to defeat you. At this moment, Lu Yun opened his mouth. His voice was cold and domineering, and his eyes were full of disdain. It was obvious that he did not take Nye Tion seriously. Is that so? Nye Tion laughed and said disdainfully, Then, great prodigy Lu, please use your sword. Courting death. When Lu Yun heard Nye Tion's sarcasm, he was instantly enraged. The Yuan spirit sword appeared in his hand, and the nine heavens cloud howl appeared. A violent and murderous sword intent immediately gathered on the sword, causing the surrounding void to stagnate. Hua! In the next moment, Lu Yun stabbed out with his sword. The tip of his sword pierced through the air, and a sword shadow appeared. It carried the will of lightning and water, and it whistled through the air with extreme sharpness. Although Lu Yun was incomparably arrogant, he was not the least bit careless. Instead, he placed great importance on Nye Tion and went all out with his sword. As a disciple of the Sixth Sky, he naturally knew how powerful the Sixth Sky was. The fact that Nye Tion could fight Sixth Sky to a draw was enough to prove his strength. QL 11. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed and the corners of his mouth twitched. As it turned out, Lu Yun was a dual attribute swordsman. Amidst the lightning, there was a hint of weak water. While his sword aura was vigorous and continuous, it also carried a violent and surging intent. Lu Yun's control over his sword intent was extremely terrifying. He had almost perfectly fused the violence of thunder and the gentleness of water together. Whoosh! Hua! Hua! At this moment, a strange scene occurred. The sword shadow in the air suddenly split into 2, then into 4, and then into 8. In the blink of an eye, a terrifying sword net was formed in the air. It rolled like a tide and enveloped Nye Tian. So powerful, the crowd could not help but exclaim when they saw this scene. However, Nye Tian shook his head and murmured, "Using such a clumsy sword technique against me. Aren't you looking down on me?" Lu Yun's sword net seemed to be brilliant, but it was actually his biggest flaw. By doing so, he expanded the range of his attack, making it impossible for Nye Tian to dodge. However, by doing so, the power of each sword shadow was greatly weakened. It was more than powerful, but not as sharp. He seemed to think that Nye Tian would choose to avoid a frontal attack, which was why he used this sword technique to force Nye Tian to face it head-on. 8 Baron's sword. In the next moment, Nye Tian reacted. With a low growl, he slashed out with his sword. The sword essence was like a raging wave as it clashed with Lu Yun. Rumble! 2 violent forces clashed against each other. Sword wills intertwined, causing the void to tremble. Lu Yun frowned and was shocked. He immediately retreated. On the other hand, Nye Tian's body swayed a little before he stood firmly. After a while, the violent force dissipated. The crowd looked at the 2 people in the sky with trembling eyes. They could not believe what they had just seen. Facing Lu Yun's sword, Nye Tian did not retreat. Instead, he forcefully clashed with it. The result of the clash was that Nye Tian had forced Lu Yun to retreat. "Genius Lu, your strength is only SOSO." At this moment, Nye Tian smiled faintly and raised his eyebrows. The calm voice sounded like a clap of thunder in Lu Yun's ears, causing him to jump up in anger. He was ranked 9th on the Sky Sword leaderboard, and he was being mocked by a swordsman with a legendary sword body. "You're courting death." In the next moment, Lu Yun suddenly raised his head. His eyes were filled with murderous intent as he stared at Nye Tian. With a roar, the sword essence from his body was released. It was extremely terrifying. Then he took a step forward. The void trembled and his aura surged like the sea. Lu Yun is angry. The crowd's eyes trembled. It was obvious that they were looking forward to what would happen next. The attack just now was just the beginning. Next, Lu Yun and Nye Tian would have a battle of life and death. Stop! However, at this moment, a low roar rang out. After that, a sharp figure appeared in the air, staring at Lu Yun with a solemn expression. Lord 6th Hao Tian. The crowd's eyes trembled as they looked at the newcomer and cried out in alarm. They did not expect 6th Sky to appear at this moment. "Teacher." Lu Yun was stunned for a moment. Then, he quickly reacted and bowed to 6th Sky respectfully. No matter how arrogant he was, he did not dare to disrespect 6th Sky. "Lu Yun, have you had enough?" 6th Sky looked at Lu Yun and said cold, "Did you cultivate in the Valley of Swords for so long just to embarrass yourself?" "Teacher." Lu Yun's face stiffened. His body was drenched in cold sweat. "I didn't use my full strength just now. Give me another chance. I will definitely defeat Nye Tian." "You didn't use your full strength?" 6th Sky sneered and reprimanded. "Then do you think Nye Tian used his full strength? If he had used his full strength just now, you would be a corpse by now." Lu Yun's eyes trembled. He was speechless. He did not understand why 6th Sky would praise Nye Tian so much and belittle his own disciple. The crowd was stunned when they saw this. They could not believe their eyes. The 6th Hao Ian had come to protect Nye Tian in every way he could. Between Nye Tian and Lu Yun, who was his disciple, Nye Tian's lips twitched, but he did not say a word. He did have the chance to kill Lu Yun in the previous attack, but there was no need for him to kill Lu Yun since there was no feud between them. "Lu Yun, are you not convinced now?" Sixth Sky looked at Lu Yun and asked in a deep voice. I'm not convinced. Lu Yun's face turned red. He could not help but look at Nye Tian and growled. Why don't you fight me? Sixth Sky's eyes darkened as an overbearing aura was unleashed. I wouldn't dare. Lu Yun was stunned. His face turned pale as he immediately knelt in front of Sixth Sky. Chapter 3350. Arrogance. You'd better not, Sixth Sky shouted as he glanced at Lu Yun coldly. Lu Yun didn't dare to say anything else, but he was depressed. He had wanted to avenge Sixth Sky, but he didn't understand why he had angered Sixth Sky. Could it be that Nye Tian was someone very important to the Sixth Haoyan? Get up, Sixth Sky said cold. Then he glanced at everyone and said loudly, Everyone, the appearance of the sword seal in the sky is a big event for swordplay in the sky. For the next 3 months, you don't have to mine sword essence anymore. Prepare for the upcoming competition in the sky. Great, we can finally rest. Everyone cheered excitedly when they heard Sixth Sky's words. Ever since they came to swordplay in the sky, they had to mine sword essence from the 10,000 sword mountains almost every day. Although their strength had been increasing, it was very boring. The upcoming competition in the sky would give them 3 months of rest. Of course, they were very excited. The sword seal in the sky has appeared. Everyone here will have a chance to enter it. At this time, Sixth Sky waved his hand and signaled for everyone to be quiet. He continued, but whether you can really enter it depends on your strength. Everyone was extremely excited. Someone couldn't help but ask loudly, Lord Sixth Sky, how can we enter the sword seal in the sky? Don't worry, Sixth Haoyan said calmly. When the other Sword Mountain groups arrive, there will be people who will explain things to you. His lips curled into a strange smile. The entire swordplay in the sky was divided into 6 Sword Mountain groups, which were controlled by the Sixth Sky. Nye Tian was in the 6th Sword Mountain group, which was controlled by the Sixth Sky. The competition in the sky was not only a matter of the 6th Sword Mountain group. Swordsmen from the other 5 Sword Mountain groups would also participate. The total number of swordsmen in the 6 Sword Mountain groups was more than 500,000. There were so many swordsmen, and they were all geniuses of the way of the sword who had come from various realms. There were even some geniuses of the way of the sword who had come from the Holy World. The battle between them would definitely be intense. Nye Tian looked into the void with an ugly expression. He was worried about Yang's son. The 7 guardians hadn't appeared yet, but they should be appearing soon. Next, everyone waited outside the sword seal in the sky, taking the opportunity to sense and absorb the power of the sword intent in the sword seal in the sky. The sword intent in the sword seal in the sky was the innate sword intent nurtured by the heavens and earth. After being absorbed by martial artists, it could be directly transformed into their own sword intent. Moments later, many swordsmen appeared in the void one after another. Half a day later, more than 500,000 swordsmen had all appeared. These were all the swordsmen of the sky, sword marshals. At this moment, they were gathered outside the sword mark in the sky, like a dense dark cloud. It turns out that there are so many famous swordsmen in the sky, sword marshals. Nye Tian looked at the crowd around him and could not help but smile bitterly. There were more than 500,000 swordsmen. How many sword crystals did the sky sword marshals provide to the holy world every year? Sure enough, the sword marshals and the sky sword marshals were a huge sword crystal mine. More than 500,000 people gathered together. Even if no one spoke loudly, the scene was still chaotic, and it was so noisy that it hurt people's eardrums. Everyone, please be quiet. At this moment, a black-clothed figure stepped out of the void and spoke in a deep voice. His thunderous voice resounded in everyone's ears as if it was going to shatter their eardrums. Immediately, the crowd quieted down, and everyone looked at the black-clothed figure. It was a middle-aged man with strong facial features. His face was as sharp as a knife, and his eyes emitted a gloomy light. He was not angry, but he was dignified. Nye Tian looked at the middle-aged man and could not help but narrow his eyes. The aura of the sword intent around the man was even stronger than that of the Sixth Sky. Clearly, the man's strength in the way of the sword was above the Sixth Sky. This person is even stronger than the Sixth Sky. He must be a sky, or even a protector, Nyetian thought to himself as he looked at the middle-aged man with a gloomy gaze. He had guessed correctly. The middle-aged man was a sky, and he was the first sky. Everyone, the 7 protectors are currently in the sword seal in the sky. So, the sky, will temporarily host a competition in the sky. The first sky glanced at everyone and said loudly with a dignified gaze. Everyone's expression changed slightly, and they immediately became even quieter, waiting for the first sky to continue. First of all, the sky, would like to tell everyone that the space in the sword seal in the sky is limited, so no more than 10,000 people can enter. The first sky chuckled and said, in other words, less than 1 in 10 people can enter the sword seal in the sky. Sigh. As soon as the first sky's voice fell, the whole audience sighed. Many people knew that they were not qualified to enter the sword seal in the sky. The sword seal in the sky opened once every 10,000 years, and it was filled with the purest sword will of heaven and earth. To be able to enter, it was the dream of all swordsmen. However, the space in the sword seal in the sky was limited, so it was destined that most of the people present would not be able to enter. You ants should know your limits. The sword seal in the sky is not a place that just any trash can enter. At this time, an extremely discordant voice was heard. It was extremely insolent, and it directly humiliated everyone present. Everyone was stunned at first, and then they looked in the direction of the voice. They saw a man in blue standing there arrogantly. His eyes were squinting, and his eyelids were rolling up to the sky. It was this man who had just humiliated them. The crowd looked at the man in blue, and their expressions were very ugly. They could not help but whisper, "Who is this guy? Why is he so insolent? His sword will aura is very strong. He is definitely someone on the sword ranking in the sky. This person is indeed arrogant. However, he has the right to be arrogant. This is the benefit of being strong." The crowd discussed among themselves, and there was a hint of fear in their eyes as they looked at the man in blue. "You bunch of ants, listen up. This young master is Ren Kunyu from the Kunlun Sacred World. I am currently ranked 7th on the sword ranking in the sky. What I said earlier was for you ants. If there is anyone who is not convinced, then step forward and fight me." Ren Kunyu announced his name, and his arrogance became even more insolent. His eyes were filled with disdain, as if he wanted to look down on people with his nostrils. "So, he is from a sacred world." The crowd exclaimed, feeling very shocked. A swordsman from the sacred world, and an existence ranked 7th on the sword ranking in the sky. No wonder Rinkunyu was so insolent. "Idiot!" Nia Tianlin glanced at Rinkunyu and laughed coldly in his heart, but he did not say it out loud. He did not want to cause unnecessary trouble. Furthermore, Ren Kunyu was an expert with a certain level of strength. It was just that he was a little too arrogant. Isn't he just ranked 7th on the sword ranking in the sky? What's so great about him? At this moment, someone could not help but say in a low voice. Chapter 33:51. Die for him. Boom. Ren Kunyu's eyes were filled with killing intent as he locked onto that person. Killing intent surged from his body, and his aura was extremely violent. He was a swordsman from the Saint Realm. How could he allow an ant from a realm to interfere with him? I didn't say anything. Sensing Ren Kunyu's killing intent, that person was so scared that his face turned pale. His lips were a little dry as he spoke in a trembling voice. He didn't say anything. However, Ren Kunyu wasn't going to let him off. With a cold laugh, a terrifying sword intent gushed forth from his body, enveloping that person. It was like a raging tidal wave, crashing into the void, majestic and majestic. Boom! That person felt a suppressive force coming from above his head, as if his body was about to be torn apart. At this moment, he felt as if his entire body was about to be torn apart. Intense pain assaulted every inch of his flesh, making him wish he was dead. So strong. Everyone was shocked by the scene in front of them. Their eyes trembled, and they couldn't help but exclaim. Although Rinkunyu was overly arrogant, his strength was definitely not for show. He was ranked 7th on the Sky Sword ranking, and his sword principle had reached the 4th heavenly layer of sword aura, making him even stronger than Liyun. Furthermore, his current methods were extremely cruel. He clearly possessed the strength to kill that man, yet he chose to torture him. Ants should have the awareness of ants. At this time, Ren Kunyu sneered and swept his gaze across everyone. Today, this young master will teach you how to be an ant. Kneel. In the end, Ren Kunyu roared fiercely and released an even more terrifying sword aura that pressed against that person. He didn't want to kill this person, but he wanted to torture and humiliate him. The faces of the crowd stiffened, and they gasped in astonishment. Not only was Ren Kunyu arrogant, but his methods were also ruthless. Making a swordsman kneel in front of everyone was undoubtedly a blow to the swordsman's heart, making him unable to raise his head in the future. I won't kneel. That person was extremely unyielding. He roared out, his spine straight, proud, and unyielding. Everyone's hearts trembled. Many people gnashed their teeth as they looked at Ren Kunyu. They were on the verge of losing control. However, at this moment, the first sky and the other sky beasts were watching with cold eyes. They had no intention of stopping Ren Kunyu at all. Ren Kunyu was someone from the Kunlun Holy Realm. Behind him was a powerful clan. Furthermore, his eldest brother was one of the 7 guardians of the Sword Martial Sky. With such a status, even those in the sky would not dare to provoke him. Offending Ren Kunyu for the sake of an ant was clearly not a wise move. Nye Tian frowned as he watched from the side. You're not going to kneel? At this time, Ren Kunyu coldly smiled and said, This young master wants to see if your bones are harder or if this young master's sword intent is stronger. Boom! After he finished speaking, his body shook, and an even more violent sword chi surged out, roaring like a wild beast, pressing towards that person. Bang! Crack, crack! The next moment, a dull sound came from a void. That person's body swayed, and then both his knees broke. Blood gushed out and dyed his legs red. However, he still did not kneel. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Ren Kunyu. He actually laughed maniacally and growled. Ren Kunyu, you want me to kneel? You'll have to kill me first. The crowd trembled, and their expressions changed. Although this swordsman was not strong, he was unyielding and worthy of respect. However, respect was only respect. No one was willing to risk their lives to save someone. Ant, you've angered this young master. Ren Kunyu's eyes suddenly narrowed, and he was completely enraged. He roared like a wild beast, and the killing intent in his eyes intensified. He said, Since you want to die, this young master will fulfill your wish. Boom! Before he finished speaking, an even more violent sword chi was released from Ren Kunyu's body. It rolled like thunder, sweeping everything and pressing towards that swordsman. This time, Ren Kunyu was determined to kill. As long as the sword chi landed, that swordsman would definitely be suppressed to death on the spot. Swoosh! At the moment of life and death, a sword essence suddenly appeared, piercing through the air. It was sharp and cold, and it fell from the sky, blocking the impact of Ren Kunyu's sword chi. Bang! Almost at the same time, that swordsman's body shook, and he broke through the pressure of the sword chi. His body suddenly swayed, and he took a few steps back. Just as he was about to fall, a hand reached out from behind to support him. Then, he felt a warm sword essence flowing through his body, and his flushed face instantly returned to normal. It's you. That person was shocked. He did not expect that someone would save him. After he turned around, he saw an unexpected face, and he spoke in a trembling voice. Nye Tian. The people from the 6th Sword Mountain looked at the person who saved him, and their eyes trembled violently as they shouted a name in unison. No one expected that the person who saved him was actually Nye Tian. Nye Tian. Lu Yun's eyes trembled when he saw that the person who saved him was Nye Tian. Then, a cold glint appeared in his eyes, and he said in his heart, Nye Tian, how dare you interfere in Ren Kunyu's matters? You're dead. As one of the top 10 powerhouses on the Sky Sword leaderboard, Lu Yun knew Ren Kunyu better than the average person. Ren Kunyu was arrogant, domineering, ruthless, and vengeful. Nye Tian, daring to make a move at this time, was undoubtedly a slap to Ren Kunyu's face. Given Ren Kunyu's character, he would definitely not rest until he was dead. You can leave. Nie Tian ignored the others and only spoke to that person. Then, he took a step forward and stared at Ren Kunyu. Who are you? Ren Kunyu glared at Nie Tian, his eyes filled with fury and killing intent, as if he couldn't wait to skin Nie Tian alive. In the Sky Sword leaderboard, there was actually someone who dared to interfere in Ren Kunyu's matters. He was simply tired of living. This matter ends here. Nie Tian did not answer Ren Kunyu. Instead, he frowned and said faintly. He saved him because he felt that the person just now was very courageous and should not die in such a sullen manner. Ren Kunyu was very arrogant, and he looked down on him. However, Ren Kunyu had no enmity with him, so he did not want to be enemies with him. And here, Ren Kunyu sneered, and the murderous intent in his eyes intensified. He roared, "Brat, who do you think you are? Since you dare to interfere in my matters, you should be prepared to die. Since you saved that ant, then you can die in his place. Kill!" Ren Kunyu roared like thunder, and the sword intent in his body moved crazily. He took a step forward, and the sword intent surged crazily, condensing into a ferocious wave that pressed towards Nie Tian. He intended to crush Nie Tian to death with his attacks. However, it was a pity that he had underestimated Nie Tian. Bang! Nie Tian frowned and also took a step forward. The sword intent in his body was released crazily, and the two terrifying sword auras collided with each other. There was a muffled sound in the void that was like a thunderclap. In the next moment, Nie Tian and Ren Kunyu retreated at the same time. The difference was that Nie Tian retreated 3 steps, while Ren Kunyu retreated dozens of meters. The strange scene caused everyone's eyes to tremble. After they sucked in a breath of cold air, their expressions froze. Chapter 33:52. Overbearing. Hundreds of thousands of eyes stared at Nie Tian and Ren Kunyu in the air. They were all stunned. Nie Tian did not lose out at all in a head-on clash with Ren Kunyu. He even managed to force Ren Kunyu back several dozen meters. Everyone's eyes widened when they saw this. It was like a dream. They wondered if what they were seeing was an illusion. How is this possible? About a dozen seconds later, Ren Kunyu's thunderous roar broke the silence. His face was pale, and his eyes were trembling violently. He looked at Nie Tian with disbelief, shock, and a hint of apprehension in his eyes. Ren Kunyu had actually lost in the clash of swords. He was a swordsman from the Saint's world. He was ranked 7th on the sword ranking of the sky. He was a monstrous genius of the way of the sword, an unparalleled prodigy. But now he had actually lost to an 8th-order pseudo-saint who only had the transcendent sword body. He was unable to accept this. He refused to accept it. He could not accept it. Gasp. At this moment, everyone reacted to Ren Kunyu's roar and gasped. They looked at Nie Tian in surprise and fear. The shock they felt was indescribable. In the sky, the first sky, and the others nearby all looked at Nie Tian with mixed emotions. Their eyes shone brightly, and they were extremely shocked. Originally, they thought that Nie Tian would be killed by Ren Kunyu directly. They never thought that Nie Tian would face Ren Kunyu head-on and not lose out at all. He even gained an absolute advantage. These people in the sky were all oracle swordsmen. Although it was only for a moment, they could all see how powerful Nie Tian was. If Nie Tian had been a little more ruthless and attacked with a sword with all his might, he would have definitely killed Ren Kunyu on the spot. Clearly, Ren Kunyu had been too careless when he faced Nie Tian with the transcendent sword body. He did not take Nie Tian seriously at all, so he did not even draw his sword. It was exactly because of his arrogance that he lost so miserably. Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. At this moment, Ren Kunyu's eyes trembled. He roared as if he had gone mad. He pointed at Nie Tian and said, "You ant, how can you be so strong? I, Ren Kunyu, am a genius ranked 7th on the Sky Sword ranking. How could I be defeated by you?" As he spoke, his aura grew stronger and stronger. He was a genius, so how could he lose to an ant? I'm an ant. Nie Tianling let out a laugh. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he said, "What right do you have to mock me with your meager strength? You keep saying that others are ants, but when you were defeated by me, didn't you look just as ugly? You pfft. Rin Kunyu's eyes trembled. He was just about to say something when he felt a tightness in his chest and spat out a mouthful of blood. He came from the saint's world. No one had ever dared to mock him like this among the swordsmen of the sky. At this moment, he was so angry that he vomited blood. Tian is really arrogant. The crowd watched the scene in front of them with trembling eyes. Their hearts were in turmoil. In particular, those who were familiar with Rin Kunyu sneered while they were shocked. Given Rin Kunyu's status and strength, the two of them had become sworn enemies after Tian had humiliated him in front of everyone. If Rin Kunyu did not kill Tian, he would definitely not be able to take it lying down. Oof. Tian, you're dead meat. Lian looked at Tian with a gloomy expression. He was very pleased with himself. This was because he had developed a deep hatred for Tian when the sixth sky had lost his temper. However, he knew that it would not be easy to kill Tian. Now that Tian had offended Rin Kunyu, the latter would not let it go so easily. You can't take a few words from me? Tian smiled coldly when he saw Rin Kunyu vomiting blood. You should think about it. What kind of expression would you have if I forced you to kneel now? Tian had only said a few words of truth, and Rin Kunyu had already vomited blood. However, Rin Kunyu had humiliated everyone present and even forced them to kneel. How despicable was his method. You ant, I'll kill you. At this time, Rin Kunyu finally exploded. With a loud roar, the sword aura around his body was like a raging wave. A green longsword appeared in his hand. It was incomparably sharp and cold. Swoosh! In the next moment, Rin Kunyu stabbed out with his sword. A green sword radiance fell from the sky like a waterfall of flowing light. It carried extreme, killing intent and attacked Tian. Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He unsheathed the starry heavenly slash, and the sound of the sword resonated through the sky. The void trembled and a sword shadow appeared. The sword radiance instantly bloomed and filled the space within tens of thousands of meters. Boom! The two sword shadows met in the void. After the collision, they shattered at the same time and turned into surging sword waves that dissipated in the air. Tian retreated slightly. His face was so gloomy that it looked like blood would drip from it. He had tolerated Rin Kunyu many times, but the latter was overbearing and wanted to kill him. He could not tolerate it any longer. Die, ant! At that moment, Rin Kunyu let out another furious roar and slashed down with his primal spirit sword, the Seven Starry Skies sword. A streak of sword light slashed through the air, leaving a cyan trail in the air as it swept towards Tian. Tian slashed out and blocked the sword shadow. Then, Rin Kunyu attacked several times, but Tian easily neutralized them. Damn it! Rin Kunyu was even more furious that he could not kill Tian. He roared like a wild beast, and his eyes were red. His killing intent was even more intense. He had to kill Tian today. Rin Kunyu, don't be so aggressive. Tian shouted as he looked up at first Hao Yin and the others, who were floating high up in the sky. He had sensed that the sword intent of First Sky and the others were pulsing. Clearly, they were ready to fight. Since Rin Kunyu came from the saint's world, it meant that his identity was extraordinary. If Tian dared to kill Rin Kunyu, First Sky would definitely take action. They allowed Rin Kunyu to kill others, but they definitely would not allow others to kill Rin Kunyu. I'm going to kill you. Rin Kunyu's fury soared to the heavens. How could he possibly give up? With a thunderous roar, he slashed out with the 7 slaughter heavenly domains. 7 sword projections appeared in the void at the same time. Like 7 azure dragons, they carried incomparably powerful auras as they slashed towards Tian. Rin Kunyu was completely enraged. He directly used his strongest move, 7 Absolutes Sky Slaughter. Boom! In an instant, Tian felt a terrifying force fall. Under the pressure of this force, the space around him became tense, as if it was going to be torn apart in the next moment. Has Rin Kunyu lost his mind? The crowd could feel the waves of sword will in the air. Their eyes trembled violently, and they were extremely shocked. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Nyetian frowned slightly. The corner of his mouth twitched, and his eyes were filled with coldness. He had been tolerating Rinkunyu, but now that Rinkunyu was going all out to kill him, he could not bear it anymore. Boom! In the next moment, Nyetian's face darkened. Terrifying sword intent surged out of his body, and a terrifying sword intent soared into the sky, causing the void to tremble. Chapter 33:53. Boom! In the void, Nyetian's sword momentum soared into the sky. His aura became more and more intense and powerful, causing the void around him to tremble. The first guy was stunned by this scene. His eyes trembled, and his calm face revealed a look of shock. He couldn't believe his eyes. In the blink of an eye, Nyetian's sword Dao had advanced from the divine sword body stage to the divine transcendent stage. Even though he had seen countless battles between swordsmen, he had never seen such a scene. How could a swordsman forcibly increase his sword principal realm? Moreover, at this moment, there was no bloody aura around Nyetian. Obviously, he had not ignited his blood chi. The moment Nyetian's sword will increased, the first guy sensed a terrifying power surging in Nyetian's body, which made him feel a trace of fear. Not only the first guy, but the other sky experts were also stunned and shocked when they saw Nyetian's berserk state. Everyone could also feel the surge of Nyetian's aura. They were shocked and panicked, and they could not help but shout, "What's going on?" If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would not have believed it. What method did Nyetian use to increase his sword principal realm? 9 limits of the starry sky, sun annihilation. At this moment, the corner of Nyetian's mouth twitched coldly. He opened his mouth, and the starry heavenly slash swept across the sky. A murderous aura bloomed and instantly enveloped the entire void. Rinkunyu suddenly felt a terrifying aura coming towards him. His eyes trembled, and the sword will in his body froze for a moment. The next moment, he felt an incomparably real aura of death. Boom! At this moment, a terrifying sword shadow appeared in the void. Like a raging dragon, it charged into the void and caused the space to tremble. A dazzling sword radiance bloomed, illuminating the entire sky and pressing down on the 7 sword shadows. The eyes of the crowd were burning with excitement. They trembled and looked forward to the most terrifying collision in the next moment. Whoosh! However, right at this moment, a profound sword insight appeared high up in the sky, and it crashed down. That sword intent didn't seem eye-catching, but its aura was like a boundless river that flowed endlessly. Boom! In the next instant, the mysterious sword intent actually erupted with a monstrous momentum and formed a sword intent vortex in the air, forcibly absorbing the attacks of Nyetian and Rinkunyu. Everyone was stunned by the scene before them. Their expressions trembled, and they were unable to describe the shock in their hearts. To be able to devour the 2 terrifying attacks so easily, what kind of heaven-defying technique was that? After that, the sword vortex vanished, and the space returned to its previous calm. It was clear as if nothing had happened. Nyetian steadied himself and raised his head to look at a figure high up in the sky. The person who intervened at the critical moment was the first sky. Rinkunyu was sweating profusely as he looked at the first sky, his eyes trembling. Luckily, the first sky intervened in time. If the collision had happened, he would have been the one injured. The power that Nyetian erupted in an instant was too terrifying, and Rinkunyu was unable to resist it. How can this guy be so strong? At this moment, the person who was the most shocked was Li Yun. The way he looked at Nyetian was filled with indescribable shock and fear. He was arrogant, but he knew his limits. Even Rinkunyu, who was ranked 7th on the sword leaderboard in the sky, was no match for Nyetian. How could he possibly be a match for Nyetian? At this moment, he finally understood how powerful Nyetian was. Previously, the 6th sky had stopped him and even reprimanded him. It was a wise decision. Nyetian looked ordinary on the surface, but his true strength was extremely terrifying. When he unleashed it in an instant, it made people shudder. Just like Rinkunyu, he was shocked by the power that Nyetian had released in an instant. At this moment, The first guy looked at Nie Tian with a pair of majestic eyes. His face was gloomy, and he seemed to be thinking about something. He did not expect Nie Tian to be so powerful. Nie Tian was also very confused at this moment. He was already prepared for the worst. He knew that the first guy would definitely intervene, but he did not expect that the latter would not kill him, but instead stop him from fighting Rinkunyu. "Kid, you are Nie Tian?" At this moment, the first guy's lips twitched, revealing a stiff smile. He said in a low voice as he glanced at the sixth sky at the same time. He had heard about Nie Tian a long time ago, but he did not believe it. He did not believe that a godly state swordsman could fight to a draw with the sixth sky. However, after seeing Nie Tian, he finally believed it. Nie Tian was indeed a genius in swordsmanship. He was able to defy the heavens with a godly sword body. Such a person not only amazed people, but also made people feel that he was dangerous. Originally, with the first guy's murderous nature, he wanted to kill Nie Tian directly. However, it was now the time for the competition in the sky, and the sword seal in the sky needed a genius like Nie Tian. Just now, when the first guy made a move, he felt the aura of the sixth guy move, as if he was going to make a move as well. What surprised him even more was that the sixth sky actually locked its aura on him. This undoubtedly meant that the sixth sky wanted to attack him just now. What was the sixth sky trying to do by attacking him? However, when the first guy made a move, the sixth sky restrained its aura. The corner of first Hao Yian's mouth twitched as he thought to himself, "Sixth Hao Yian, you seem to have a special relationship with this kid." He concluded that the sixth guy made a move to protect Nie Tian. He was very curious about the relationship between the sixth guy and Nie Tian. He did not believe that the sixth guy wanted to attack just because of Nie Tian's talent. "Do you know me, Lord Hao Yian?" Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at the first Hao Yian and smiled. He sensed a flash of murderous intent in the first guy's eyes. "QL 11-inch, as soon as you came to the sky, you killed Yang Sun and tied with the sixth sky. These things have long been spread in the sky. Even if I don't want to know your name, I can't," the first guy said with a cold smile. "Are you complimenting me, Lord Sky?" Nie Tian was equally calm. Sort of, the first guy twitched his lips and said, "Let's call it a day between you and Rinkunyu. It's just a small misunderstanding. Don't take it to heart. Since Lord Sky has spoken, I will naturally obey." Nie Tian bowed slightly and withdrew his sword aura. Then, he glanced at Rinkunyu with undisguised disdain in his eyes. Rinkunyu's expression turned ugly. He was furious, but he could only nod. He knew that he was no match for Nie Tian. If they continued to fight, he would be the one to suffer. The small disturbance ended just like that. However, everyone knew that the enmity between Nie Tian and Rinkunyu had been established, and it would not end just like that. Chapter 3354. Killing intent everywhere. Nie Tian saw the face of the young man in blue. He frowned, and his heart sank. It was an unfamiliar face, but Nie Tian felt that it was very familiar. It was clearly similar to Yang Sun's. However, the face of the young man in blue was more exquisite and beautiful. His eyes were extremely demonic, emitting an icy blue glow that sent chills down one's spine. The blue-robed young man stared at Nie Tian, and killing intent flashed in his eyes. It was so sharp that it seemed as if the space around him had been frozen. What a cold aura! Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he exclaimed in surprise. Although the young man in blue did not speak, the murderous intent in his eyes was obvious. Nie Tian guessed that this person must be related to Yang Sun. "Nie Tian, he's Yang Sun's son, Yang Bingxian. You've killed Yang Sun. He won't let you off." At this moment, a deep voice sounded beside Nie Tian, filled with killing intent. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he looked at Li Yun. It was the latter who had spoken. "Are you reminding me?" The corners of Nie Tian's lips curled up as he smiled. He did not expect Li Yun to speak to him at this moment. "Humph." Li Yun smiled coldly and said, "I might as well give you another reminder. Yang Bingxian is ranked 3rd on the Sky Sword list. His strength is far beyond mine and Rinkunyu's. Furthermore, he is good at assassination, so you have to be careful." "Oh, is that so?" Nie Tian smiled again and said, "If that's the case, I'll have to thank you for your reminder. It won't be too late to thank me if you can survive Yang Bingshuan's attack." Lu Yun smiled as his eyes darkened. His words to Nie Tian were more of a threat than a reminder. His strength was not enough to kill Nie Tian, but seeing Nie Tian die in Yang Bingshuan's hands made him very happy. "Don't worry, I will definitely survive." Nie Tian smiled faintly and ignored Lu Yun. Before the martial arts competition in the sky had even begun, he had already offended 3 of the top 10 on the Sky Sword list. It seemed like the road ahead of him was not going to be so easy. "Everyone, your divine souls will soon enter an illusion. Your martial cultivation base will be suppressed to the peak paramount God level, and your Tao of the Sword will be suppressed to the transcendent God Word Soul level." At this moment, the first sky glanced at the crowd and said, "In the illusion, you can attack as you wish. Those who are killed in the illusion will not die, but their souls will return to their bodies. However, once he comes out of the illusion, it means that this person will be deprived of the right to enter the Sky Sword Seal. So that's how the exalted first sky is going to eliminate people." Unsightly expressions could be seen on the faces of the crowd. Entering an illusion where everyone's cultivation base would be suppressed to the peak paramount God level and the transcendent God Word Soul level was a very dangerous thing to do. In this way, it was equivalent to testing the swordsman's talent and not his strength. After all, the more talented a person was, the more power they would be able to unleash within the same cultivation level. Listen up, ladies and gentlemen. The first Sky Sword Seal said the Sky Sword Seal can only hold 10,000 people. In other words, most of the sword cultivators present will not be able to enter the Sky Sword Seal. The first Clear Sky continued to speak in a loud voice. "If you want to enter the Sword Seal, then show me your strength." Everyone's eyes trembled even more. First, Hao Ian's words were clearly encouraging the swordsmen present to kill each other. Some of the more talented ones were smiling coldly, and their eyes glittered with coldness as they stared at the weaklings in their eyes. The following illusionary realm was destined to be a great wave washing away the sand, eliminating the martial artists with weak talent and letting the people with stronger talent obtain the qualifications to enter the Clear Sky Sword Seal. Those with weaker talent were no different from ants and should have been eliminated in the first place. "All right, let's enter the illusion." At that moment, the first Hao Ian laughed heartily. A light shadow mirror appeared in his hand, and he spun it in his hand. Suddenly, a dazzling light appeared and turned into countless beams of light that enveloped every swordsman present. Everyone felt their souls tremble, and in the next moment, they entered an unfamiliar environment. It was a world of swords filled with intense sword will. Up above, countless illusory swords could be seen hovering over everyone's heads, as if they might fall at any moment. What is this place? How could there be such intense sword will? It's so magical. Everyone looked at the space around them, and their eyes couldn't help but tremble. They felt a sense of novelty and shock. "This is an illusion in the Sky Sword Seal," said a powerful voice from First Sky. "All of you will be suppressed by the warding spells, and your cultivation bases will be suppressed to the same level." "Is that true?" The crowd's expressions changed, after which they sensed their own bodies and their expressions changed. First Sky was right. They were all suppressed to the peak paramount God level, and their Tao of the Sword had been suppressed to the transcendent God Sword Soul level. Now it's time for you to do whatever you want. Once you eliminate less than 10,000 people, the illusion in the Sky Sword Seal will be lifted. Then, the first Clear Sky's voice rang out again. But remember, the restrictions in the Clear Sky illusion will become stronger. In 10 days, the warding spells will be so strong that you won't be able to handle them. Therefore, you have 10 days to eliminate less than 10,000 people. The powerful and cold voice resounded in everyone's hearts, causing everyone to feel a great impact. Within 10 days, the more than 500,000 people present would be eliminated until less than 10,000 remained. Such a high rate of elimination was simply too cruel. Lu Yun hovered in midair, looking at Nie Tian from a distance, his voice cold and sinister. Niet Tian, he said, this illusion has saved your life. He had been planning to join forces with Ren Kunyu and Yang Bingxian to kill Niet Tian in the first round of the test. How could he ever have guessed that killing Niet Tian would be of no use? It would only allow his soul to return to his true body. Niet Tian's eyebrows furrowed slightly as he was deeply shocked. The mirror of light and shadow that First Sky Sword Seal had just taken out was simply too terrifying. In the blink of an eye, it had taken the souls of hundreds of thousands of cultivators and forced them into an illusion. Oomph! A moment later, Niet Tian became cold, and when he sensed the change in the atmosphere, he chuckled coldly and murmured, I just got here, and I'm already surrounded by killing intent. He could sense several auras closing in on him, and it was obvious that they didn't have good intentions. Mo Qianjun, who was standing next to Niet Tian, smiled bitterly and said, Brother Nya, it seems a lot of people are interested in you. Chapter 3355. A Killing Spree. Niet Tian's mouth twisted into a strange smile, and his eyes flickered with coldness. Considering how strong his sword intent was and how well he controlled it, no one the same cultivation level as him could possibly be a match for him. Unless it was someone like Six Sky, who had a far superior understanding of sword intent, there was no one who could possibly stand up to him. But the sword cultivators in the illusion were all young, and none of them had the same level of understanding of sword intent as Six Sky. Mo Qianjun could sense the confidence in Niet Tian's eyes. Brother Nya, let's fight side by side, he said with a cool smile. In the clear heaven illusion, everyone was suppressed to the peak paramount god level, so Mo Qianjun's cultivation base was no longer a weakness. Therefore, he was much more confident than before. The truth was that Mo Qianjun was extremely talented in the Tao of the Sword. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been on the same level as Niet Tian in the past. Furthermore, his performance in the Sky Sword Martialism showed that he was no weaker than anyone else. He hadn't been the Sky Sword Martialism for very long, and the fact that he had reached the transcendent level of profundity went to show how talented he was. Unfortunately, his cultivation base was only in the 5th step, which severely limited his sword intent. But now that everyone was on the same level as him, Mo Qianjun wasn't afraid of anyone else. He was curious to see if his Tao of the Sword would be able to suppress anyone in the same cultivation level. All right, Niet Tian said, laughing heartily, his eyes glittering with arrogance and passion. After all these years, he was very excited to be able to fight side by side with 9th Heaven Sword Martialism. Unfortunately, Zhu Qiansheng didn't have a god soul, so he couldn't even enter the illusion in the Sky Sword Martialism. Otherwise, the three of them would be able to fight side by side. There was one other thing that Niet Tian found strange. Nie Fenghua and Bailey Shengxue hadn't shown up yet. The sword seal in the Sky Sword Martialism had opened, but Nie Fenghua hadn't shown up. That made Niet Tian a bit worried. Although Bailey Shengxue hadn't been the Sky Sword Martialism, the Sky Sword Martialism should have been back. Niet Tian was worried, but he couldn't care too much about it now. He could only focus on what was in front of him. At this time, more than a dozen figures appeared, surrounding Niet Tian and Mo Qianjun. Brother Mo, it seems like someone has been eyeing me for a long time. Niet Tian's eyes swept across the tens of swordsmen in front of him. His lips twitched as he said with a bitter smile. He hadn't been in the Sky Sword Martial School for long, but the things he had done were earth-shattering. He had killed 100 swords, killed 1,000 swords, destroyed Wan Jian, and even fought to a draw in the Sky Sword Martial School. No matter which swordsman it was, they would need to spend countless years to achieve this. However, Niet Tian did it in an extremely short period of time, making him unparalleled in the limelight. It was normal for him to be targeted. In particular, he had killed Yang's son. The latter had been operating in the Sky Sword Club for many years. His power was deeply rooted, and he had the support of a big shot. Many people wanted to take Niet Tian's head and claim credit from the big shot behind Yang's son. I have tolerated these people for a long time. Today, I can finally kill them all. Mo Qianjun laughed loudly and said, They see me as an ant. I want to see how strong they are when we are in the same realm. Mo Qianjun was a steady person, but he had been discriminated against too much in the Sky Sword Martial School. He finally had the chance to vent his pent-up frustrations. Of course, he wanted to fight to his heart's content, kill him and avenge Lord Yang's son. At this time, a swordsman roared. His figure moved in an instant. His figure was agile like a demon. With a thrust of his sword, a sharp sword intent attacked Nietian. Your speed is not bad, but your momentum is too weak. Nietian laughed coldly. He didn't even draw his sword. Instead, sword intent surged out of his palm, and he thrust it out. Instantly, the void trembled, and a wave of sword intent surged out, sweeping everything in its path. Bang! The swordsman did not even have the chance to let out a final scream. His figure trembled and turned into a ray of light. He was killed by Nietian and became the first person to be expelled from the illusion in the sky. This guy is so strong. The surrounding people could not help but exclaim. At the same realm, Nietian did not draw his sword. He only used his momentum to kill his opponent. One could imagine how strong he was. In the distance, a pair of cold eyes locked on Nietian. It was Yang Sun's son, Yang Bingxian. Nietian, you really did not let me down. Yang Bingxian stared at Nietian and said in his heart, but now, it is just the beginning. Your road to the Sky Martial Arts competition is destined to end in this illusion. Although he could not kill Nietian by expelling him from the illusion, he could deprive him of the right to enter the Sword Seal in the sky. If Nietian could not even enter the Sword Seal in the sky, he would be no different from a waste. At that time, Yang Bingxian would personally kill Nietian. No one would dare to object. Who would protect a waste who could not even enter the Sword Seal in the sky? Kill. The first person to attack was killed by Nietian, but the others did not retreat. Instead, they roared in unison and moved at the same time. Swoosh! Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, numerous sword shadows whizzed through the air towards Nietian and Mo Qianjun. The two felt the space around them tighten. Their eyes narrowed at the same time, and they immediately attacked. Wong! Mo Qianjun attacked with the infinite sky. There was an intense sword cry in the void. At the same time, the great sky sword seal in his body was activated. In an instant, a powerful force burst out, causing the space to tremble. Boom! In the next moment, a sword shadow whizzed out and pressed towards several swordsmen, drowning them directly. The crowd was shocked. They did not expect Mo Qianjun, who usually did not have a presence, to be so terrifying. Boom! 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 On the other side, Nietian killed with his sword. Several sword shadows appeared, and each sword shadow killed one person. Nietian's sword intent could fight people 2 realms above him. Under the same cultivation realm, these people were like chickens and dogs in front of him, but this time more people surrounded them. Pairs of eyes stared at Nietian and Mo Qianjun as if they wanted to eat them up. Kill! Nietian's eyes swept across, and he roared. The starry sky slash streaked across the void. Wherever the sword's shadow passed, heaven and earth trembled, and the gods and ghosts wailed. His sword intent seemed to have the power to destroy everything. Wherever the sword pointed, it was invincible. Mo Qianjun was like a fish in water, killing everything in his way. These people, who were usually high and mighty, were actually so vulnerable at this moment. Those 2 guys are so scary. The crowd stared at Nietian and Mo Qianjun with wide eyes. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. In just a blink of an eye, Nietian and Mo Qianjun eliminated hundreds of people. This was simply abnormal. Yang Bingxian, are you still not going to attack? Tianling stood in the air. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked at the empty space coldly. There was nothing in that space, but Nietian knew that Yang Bingxian was hiding there. Lu Yin said that Yang Bingxian was ranked 3rd on the Sky Sword ranking. Not only was he strong, but he was also good at assassination. Chapter 33:56. Qian Sun cold ere those who were good at assassinations had very strong concealment abilities. They were like ferocious tigers lying in the bushes, waiting to give their prey a fatal blow. At this moment, Yang Bingxian regarded himself as a tiger and Niet Tian as his prey. Unfortunately, Niet Tian was no ordinary prey. He had already seen the ferocious tiger's every move clearly. Yang Bingxuan's concealment method was brilliant. With Niet Tian's spiritual force, he shouldn't have been able to discover him. However, Niet Tian had a freakish existence by his side, the Evernight Demon Fox. Everything that the Evernight Demon Fox sensed was reflected in Niet Tian's mind. Therefore, all of Yang Bingxuan's actions were under Niet Tian's control. Bang! At this moment, the space trembled. After that, a sharp blade appeared, emitting an extremely cold aura. Everywhere it passed by, the sword intent in the air was actually frozen. In an instant, everyone felt a piercingly cold air appear and spread out in the void, almost freezing the entire illusory realm. Crack, crack, crack. The void trembled, and an extremely cold aura filled the void. Frost and snow actually floated in the air. Everyone's eyes trembled violently as they felt the chill in the air intensify. At this moment, the corner of Niet Tian's mouth twitched, and a sinister smile appeared on his face. You finally couldn't hold it in anymore. Yang Bingxian couldn't help it and directly attacked him. In the next moment, Niet Tian reacted. His figure was like a ghost as he sidestepped dozens of meters to the side, perfectly avoiding the blade of cold air. However, he was still affected by the residual power of the cold blade. A wave of cold air enveloped him and instantly entered his body. Niet Tian's silhouette paused in the air, and a strange scene occurred. His entire body was actually covered in a layer of ice crystals, and he was completely frozen. Niet Tian. This shocking scene caused Mo Qianjuan's eyes to tremble. He let out a cry of surprise and flew toward Niet Tian. In the void, a silhouette appeared. It was Yang Bingxian. When he saw Niet Tian, his eyes couldn't help but tremble. He had never imagined that Niet Tian could actually dodge his killing blow. To him, this was simply impossible. In that instant, the speed of the blade of cold qi had reached its peak. It was impossible for Niet Tian to avoid it, unless he had already sensed it. Yang Bingxian was very confident in his identity. Even the Oracle swordsman might not be able to detect him. Moreover, he had purposely suppressed his aura just now. Not even the slightest fluctuation. How did Niet Tian find him? In the next moment, the corner of Yang Bingxuan's mouth twitched into a sneer as he murmured, "It doesn't matter anymore. Even if you can dodge the cold blade's frontal attack, you can't stop the cold energy from entering your body. Right now, you're just a target. How long more can you survive? Kill him." After saying that, Yang Bingxian growled and gave the order to the martial artists below. He had never underestimated Niet Tian, so he arranged so many people to kill Niet Tian. He wanted to make Niet Tian slack so that he could burst out with a fatal blow and kill Niet Tian. However, Niet Tian's strength still exceeded his expectations. Even so, Yang Bingxian felt that there was no hindrance. Niet Tian was still going to be killed. Kill! In the next moment, dozens of swordsmen roared at the same time. Their auras were like rainbows as they instantly attacked. Sword intent attacks tore through the air, aiming to kill Niet Tian. Niet Tian's eyes trembled slightly as the dragon vein in his body circulated crazily. He had expected Yang Bingxian to attack, but he didn't expect the latter's cold energy to be so terrifying and domineering. The moment the cold energy entered his body, it directly froze all the meridians in his body. It was extremely terrifying. If it weren't for his strong martial body, the cold energy would have instantly frozen him into ice. "All of you, get out of my way!" Mo Qianjun roared and activated the Juntian sword seal to the extreme. His whole body released a powerful sword intent that enveloped Niet Tian and formed a sword intent shield around him. Bang, bang, bang. Then, the violent attacks landed on the sword shield and exploded with a dull sound. The sword shield formed by the Juntian sword seal helped Niet Tian block all the attacks, but there were countless cracks on the sword shield, and it was on the verge of collapse. "Kill! Die!" At that moment, two deep, murderous voices echoed out at the same time as two figures dashed through the air, brandishing their swords in an attempt to kill Niet Tian. "Huh? Mo Qianjun looked at the two people and could not help but be stunned for a moment. The two people who attacked were Ren Kunyu and Lu Yun. These two people were ranked in the top 10 of the Sky Sword ranking. They actually chose to attack at this time. How despicable! Although Ren Kunyu and Lu Yun's strength was suppressed, they were monstrous sword arts geniuses after all. Under the same level of strength, they could easily crush ordinary geniuses. Mo Qianjun could only block one person with all his strength. It was impossible for him to save Nie Tian. Fight! At this critical moment, Mo Qianjun's eyes darkened. Then, he moved and formed a sword-soul doppelganger. Boom! Boom! The two doppelgangers attacked Ren Kunyu and Lu Yun at the same time. Boom! Boom! In the next moment, the two sides collided at the same time, causing the void to tremble. The crowd was shocked. Mo Qianjun formed a doppelganger in an instant to fight against Ren Kunyu and Lu Yun at the same time. It was too strong. Huh? Yang Bingxian, who was high up in the sky, trembled, and his killing intent became heavy. He did not expect that a rank 5 pseudo-sacred swordsman beside Nie Tian would be so difficult to deal with. It seemed that he would have to kill one more person after getting out of the illusion in the sky. Bang! Bang! At this moment, two muffled sounds could be heard. Mo Qianjun's two doppelgangers shattered at the same time and turned into rays of light. He had been blasted out of the illusion in the sky. However, he had blocked the fatal attacks from Ren Kunyu and Lu Yun for Nie Tian. Mo Qianjun. What he saw caused Nie Tian's eyes to tremble, and he roared like a wild beast. Immediately, the blood in his body flowed in reverse, and waves of dragon aura were released, forcing out the cold aura in his body. Bang! The ice crystal outside his body instantly shattered, and a towering sword will burst out. Damn it! Ren Kunyu and Lu Yun growled when they saw this. Their figures froze, and they retreated at the same time. However, Nie Tian's eyes were fixed on them like the eyes of a ferocious wolf. Since the two of them had blasted Mo Qianjun out of the illusion, they would not be able to stay here. Ren Kunyu and Lu Yun stood still and felt Nie Tian's violent killing intent. Their hearts trembled, and their faces were filled with unconcealable fear. They knew that Nie Tian was furious. How was this possible? In the sky, Yang Bingxian stared at Nie Tian with his mouth twitching and his eyes filled with shock. Nie Tian had actually forced out his 1,000 Sun cold qi. This was something that he had never dreamed of. The 1,000 Sun cold qi was the power of his bloodline. It was extremely cold and could turn snow into a blade. He had used this power to kill opponents who were much stronger than him. However, his 1,000 Sun cold qi was forced out against Nie Tian, who was at the same realm as him. Could it be that his bloodline power is stronger than mine? Yang Bingxuan's eyes widened in shock. To be able to force out the 1,000 Sun cold qi meant that Nie Tian had a stronger bloodline power. All of you attack together. At this moment, Nie Tian's gaze swept across Yang Bingxian and the rest. He said coldly, "To avoid trouble." Chapter 33:57. In the sky illusion, Nie Tianling stood in the air. His eyes were filled with coldness like a vicious wolf. The aura around him was terrifying. The sharp sword intent was like a sharp blade, causing the surrounding space to tremble. Yang Bingxuan's eyes turned cold. He took a step forward, and the coldness around him intensified. Frost and snow floated in the air within 10,000 meters. It's so cold. The coldness entered their bodies. Everyone couldn't help but shiver as they looked at Yang Bingxian in fear. Nie Tian, you're able to force out Qian Sun's cold qi. This is beyond my expectations. Yang Bingxuan's eyes flickered with, but it doesn't matter. It won't change anything. It will only make your death more unsightly. His cold voice fell, and every word was filled with cold, killing intent. Is that so? Nie Tianling laughed. The corner of his mouth raised into a contemptuous arc. He was not afraid of anyone in the same realm. Even if Yang Bingxian was ranked 3rd on the Sky Sword ranking, he was not afraid. Arrogant. Yang Bingxuan's eyes were cold. A sword made of ice appeared in his hand. It was his Yuan Ling sword, Shuang Yuqian Sun. Swoosh! In the next moment, Yang Bingshuan's figure moved. The Shuang Yuqian Sun swept across the sky. Suddenly, a sharp blade appeared, causing the surrounding space to tremble. With extreme speed, the blade flew towards Nietian. Yang Bingshuan's body contained a powerful bloodline, Qian Sun's cold qi. When he was young, he used a secret technique to sacrifice his Yuan Ling sword to cultivate the sword intent of Qian Sun. The sword of Qian Sun was incomparably powerful. Coupled with the terrifying cold qi, a single slash was enough to freeze an entire mountain. Qian Sun's cold qi? Nietian smiled coldly. The corner of his mouth twitched as he swung the sword in his hand. A strand of sword intent shot out from the tip of the sword and condensed into a huge dragon in the air, roaring as it charged forward. Rumble! The giant dragon soared into the sky and attacked fiercely, shattering the cold blade in the sky. At this moment, Yang Bingxian furrowed his brows as he felt a pressure bearing down on him. His expression changed as he retreated in a frenzy. QL11 he steadied himself, his forehead dripping with cold sweat. His eyes trembled as he looked at Nietian. The strength of Nietian's sword intent had exceeded his expectations. It was simply unbelievable. Yang Bingxian, if this is your strength, then it's too disappointing. Nie Tianling smiled coldly and was extremely arrogant. Sword intent and dragon qi swirled around his body like burning flames. Even though Qian Sun's frost qi was frightening, he had fused his sword will with his dragon qi, causing the power of the frost qi to be greatly weakened. You're courting death. Being mocked, Yang Bingxian was enraged. He roared and took a step forward. An ice tentacle appeared under his feet. It was like a ghost claw that extended through the void. Boom, boom, boom. At the same time, the snowflakes floating around Yang Bingshuan's body instantly became violet, whistling in the air like a sleeping beast. The next moment, it would erupt with a murderous power. Yang Bingxian is angry. The crowd's eyes trembled as they started to retreat. They could see that Yang Bingxian was being suppressed by Nietian. If it was under normal circumstances, they would think that Nietian was not Yang Bingshuan's opponent. After all, the difference between their realms was too great. But in the sky illusion, Nietian and Yang Bingxian, who were at the same realm, seemed to be stronger than Nietian. This undoubtedly meant that at least in terms of sword Dao, Nietian was stronger than Yang Bingxian. Nietian, go to hell. At this time, Yang Bingxian roared, and then his figure moved. The ice tentacles under his feet spread out in an instant. It was as if thousands of demons were dancing wildly, filled with a terrible chill. Like a storm, it pressed towards Nietian. At the same time, the frost around Yang Bingshuan's body instantly became sharp, like a beast bearing its claws. The fierce aura and killing intent were strong. Feeling the cold aura rushing towards him, Nietian's eyes slightly narrowed, and his face changed. And at the next moment, an even more terrifying scene happened. The frost in the void actually bloomed and turned into ice blades in the air. Condensed snow into ice blades. Nietian's heart trembled, and his face changed. Yang Bingshuan's strength had exceeded his expectations. His control over the sword intent had reached such a superb level. Using the sword intent to condense frost and snow, and using frost and snow to condense ice blades, it was brilliant and full of killing intent. What is he trying to do? The onlookers suddenly noticed something, and their faces changed as they exclaimed. Yang Bingxian was obviously going to erupt with his true strength, and his strength was far beyond everyone's expectations. Perhaps in the next moment, many people would be caught in the crossfire. Kill! At this moment, Yang Bingxian roared hoarsely, and his face was ferocious like a wild beast. Swish, swish, swish. Suddenly, the thousands of ice blades in the void moved in an instant, like a rain of arrows, covering the sky and earth, bombarding Nietian. But the range of the ice blades was too large, and Nietian was not the only one who had to bear the attack. Come! Nie Tianling stood in the air, His eyes flashed with a cold light. With a low roar, the sword intent in his body surged endlessly, and then the power of demons and gods surged out, surging violently, bringing with it a terrible dark aura, making people feel a strong sense of destruction. 9 limits of starry sky, sun annihilation. In the next moment, Niet Tion roared, and the starry sky slash was unleashed. Sword shadows whistled out, and the power of demons and gods bloomed in the void, as if darkness had descended, causing the heavens and earth to tremble. Rumble. Swish, swish, swish. Then, the sword shadows fell, attacking the thousands of ice tentacles and the endless ice blade storm, causing the void to tremble. An ear-piercing sound rang out, causing people to feel that the heavens and earth were shaking, as if the world was about to collapse. Almost there. At the same time, ice blades and ice tentacles fell from the sky, landing on the crowd, and wails of ghosts and howls of wolves could be heard. Yang Bingxian released the congealing snow blade technique, intending to kill Niet Tion, but he didn't care about the others. Of course, he wouldn't care about this. In his eyes, these ants shouldn't be here, and they didn't have the qualifications to step into the sword seal in the sky. Kill! At this moment, Niet Tion roared, and his silhouette didn't stop, using the sword shadows in front of him as a shield, wanting to forcefully break through the ice blade storm. Courting death, Yang Bingxian roared in a low voice, killing intent flashing in his eyes. The Qinchuan frost chi within his body surged forth, causing the ice blade storm and ice tentacles to become even more violent, especially those ice tentacles, which continued to extend in the air, enveloping Niet Tion. Waves of cold chi were like maggots, crazily seeping into Niet Tion's body, wanting to freeze his meridians. Niet Tion activated the astral soul shield, but it could only block the ice tentacles. It was unable to block the cold chi from entering his body. Chapter 3358. Truly ferocious. That kid was killed by Yang Bingxian. The crowd retreated in a frenzy. Many of them couldn't see Niet Tion's figure and couldn't help but exclaim. Niet Tion clearly had the absolute advantage just now, but in the blink of an eye, he was submerged by the ice tentacles. Wasn't he dead for sure? Just now, countless ice blades fell, killing thousands of people on the spot. Niet Tion was surrounded by even more terrifying ice tentacles. How could he have a chance to survive? Although that guy is monstrous, he still couldn't defeat Yang Bingxian. Everyone's eyes trembled as they looked at Yang Bingxian in horror. At this moment, they were certain that Niet Tion had been frozen into pieces by the ice tentacles. Yang Bingxian sneered and shouted, Niet Tion, Yang Bingxian, have said it before. You can't change the result. Useless struggle will only make his death more unsightly. Is that so? However, right when he finished speaking, a low voice resounded, and it actually came from within the boundless ice tentacles. It was precisely Niet Tion. Yang Bingxian was stunned for a moment. His face became as ugly as it could be. Niet Tion's words were like a slap to his face, mercilessly slapping him. That guy isn't dead, everyone exclaimed. They didn't expect Niet Tion to still be alive. Under the ice tentacles, how could Niet Tion survive? Bang! In the midst of everyone's bewilderment, a muffled explosion suddenly rang out. A terrifying force broke through the encirclement of the ice tentacles and extended into the void. What is that? Everyone's eyes trembled. They saw a thing that looked like an iron chain dancing wildly in the air, emitting a mysterious aura that caused their hearts to tremble. This mysterious aura was the power of the heavenly Tao. That iron chain was the heavenly Tao's shackles. Bang, bang, bang. Following that, more chains broke through the ice. Suddenly, the void was filled with a strong aura of the heavenly Tao. The ice in the space was actually slowly melting. A total of 9 shackles of the heavenly Tao were broken. Like a 9-headed serpent, it danced wildly in the air, exuding an imposing aura. How is this possible? Yang Bingxian was shocked by the scene in front of him. His eyes were trembling in disbelief. Nietian was actually able to break out of the ice after being submerged by the ice tentacles. This was simply unbelievable. Just what kind of power was in Nietian's body to be able to break through the ice tentacles? Bang! However, at that instant, the 9 shackles of the heavenly Tao began to vibrate violently. The rift began to tremble as countless icy tentacles shattered into pieces. Yang Bingshuan's eyes trembled violently, and his expression became sluggish. Yang Bingxian, you're dead. At this moment, Nietian's figure appeared. 9 heavenly Tao shackles surged around his body, and he exuded a powerful and imposing aura. At the same time, his entire person looked extremely strange. Boom! As soon as his voice fell, the 9 heavenly Tao shackles moved at the same time. They gathered together like a giant dragon and attacked the ice blade storm. Rumble! Crack, crack, crack! The power of the heavenly Tao shackles erupted in an instant and actually tore the ice blade storm apart. Yang Bingshuan's eyes trembled. He instantly reacted and retreated frantically. Die! However, at this moment, an ice-cold voice rang out from Nietian's throat. Immediately after, he slashed out with his sword. The instant the sword's shadow rushed out, a terrifying power blossomed, as if it was crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Yang Bingxian felt a terrifying, strangling force appearing, causing his expression to change as he screamed in horror. Bang! However, it was already too late. A muffled sound came from the void. Yang Bingshuan's figure was sent flying, turning into a ray of light and disappeared. Yang Bingxian was killed. Everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. Their faces instantly stiffened, and they were speechless for a long time. Nietian was too terrifying. He actually blasted the 3rd-ranked swordsman on the Sky Sword ranking out of the illusion. This also meant that Yang Bingxian had lost the qualification to enter the sword seal in the sky. It sounded a bit ridiculous that the 3rd-ranked swordsman couldn't enter the sword seal in the sky. But it was true. Nietian deprived Yang Bingxian of the opportunity to enter the sword seal in the sky. Nietian, how dare you drive Yang Bingxian out of the illusion? At this moment, Li Yun finally reacted and said with trembling eyes, not only will I expel Yang Bingxian, but I'll expel you as well. Nietian spun around and fixed Li Yun with a pair of cold, murderous eyes. It was because of Lu Yun and Rin Kunyu that Mo Qianjun was blasted out of the illusion. Since Mo Qianjun couldn't enter the sword seal in the sky, Nietian wanted Li Yun, Rin Kunyu, and the others to also not be able to enter the sword seal. You! Lu Yun's eyes trembled. He was extremely shocked, and his words became somewhat incoherent. He said, I am a disciple of the 6th sky. You can't kill me? I can't. Nietian sneered and took a step forward. His entire body surged with a violent and boundless aura, and without the slightest hesitation, he slashed out with his sword. Where the sword shadow landed, Li Yun didn't even have time to let out a final scream before he was directly killed. This guy. The crowd's faces stiffened and the corners of their mouths could not help but twitch. Nietian actually blasted Lu Yun out of the illusion. In the blink of an eye, Nietian killed 2 swordsmen from the top 10 swordsmen on the Sky Sword ranking. How could they not be shocked? Nietian, you! Rin Kunyu screamed at the side. He was so scared that his face turned pale and he couldn't even speak. Under normal circumstances, he wasn't a match for Nietian. In the illusion in the sky, it was even more impossible for him to be a match for Nietian. Get out of here too! Nietian roared and directly slashed with his sword. Rin Kunyu didn't even have time to react and was directly blasted out. This guy is really fierce. The crowd looked at Nietian with unconcealable shock and fear on their faces. Nietian was too terrifying. He killed 3 swordsmen in the top 10 of the sword ranking in a row. Yang Bingxian, Rin Kunyu, and Lu Yun, as the top 10 swordsmen on the sword ranking, were actually unable to enter the sword seal in the sky. This was enough to make them a joke. Who else wants to kill me? Come at me together. At this time, Nietian's gaze swept across everyone. His eyes were like a hawk's and a wolf's, flickering coldly. He released a fierce and domineering aura that made people shudder. The crowd's eyes trembled, and many people were so scared that cold sweat broke out on their faces. Nietion's sword intent and his control over it were far superior to anyone else's. If he went on a killing spree, it was estimated that none of these hundreds of thousands of people could stop him. In fact, in the Sky Sword ranking, there were existences stronger than Yang Bingxian. However, they didn't want to make a move against Nietion at this time. Their strength was stronger than Nietion's, but under the same realm, they were somewhat afraid of Nietion. Entering the Sky Sword seal was a big deal. It wasn't worth the risk on Nietion. Many people present wanted to kill Nietion, but they understood that in this illusion, they couldn't be a match for Nietion. Chapter 33:59. Twin stars of ice and fire. As soon as Nietion's voice rang out, everyone was so shocked that no one responded. Since no one wants to speak, then step back. Nietion's eyes were evil. He said in a cold tone, "I don't want anyone to be within a 10,000-meter radius of us." A 10,000-meter radius? The crowd was shocked. They all stepped back and stayed far away from Nietion. At this moment, Nietion was like a monster. It was better to stay as far away from him as possible. Nietion had an absolute advantage in the illusion in the sky, but he chose not to attack. This was kind to the others. If he attacked with all his strength, even the first and second rank swordsmen on the Sky Sword ranking would not be able to stop him. Then, under the watchful eyes of countless people, Nietion sat down with his legs crossed and entered into a state of cultivation. Hao Yian illusory realm was not an ordinary environment, but it was transformed by pure sword essence. It was filled with the aura of sword essence. Cultivating here was a kind of enjoyment for a swordsman. This guy is cultivating here? The crowd looked at Nietion, and their eyes were shaking. They were speechless. Hao Yian illusory realm was the cruelest elimination for all swordsmen. In the end, only 10,000 people could survive in the illusory realm. The elimination rate was so high that it was very cruel. However, under such circumstances, Nietion actually started cultivating, which made everyone's jaws drop. Nietion had his own plan. The first sky said that the sword pressure in the illusion would become stronger and stronger. After 10 days, it would be too strong for everyone to bear. Therefore, he didn't need to waste his time to eliminate others. He just needed to let the illusion eliminate itself. This was a fair way. If they couldn't even bear the sword pressure in the illusion, they would only be able to make up the numbers by entering the sword seal in the sky. In the distance, a red-haired young man looked at Nietion. The corners of his mouth twitched as he muttered to himself, "This guy is quite smart." The red-haired young man was tall and sturdy, with handsome features. His eyebrows were like swords, and his eyes were like stars. He looked extremely sharp, especially his fiery red hair, which was extremely violent. From afar, it looked like burning flames. The sword intent on his body converged, but the inadvertently surging fire sword intent showed his strength. His aura was even more terrifying than Yang Bingxian. His name was Li Jin, and he was ranked second on the Sky Sword list. Together with Yang Bingxian, they were known as the Ice and Fire Twin Stars. However, he had never gotten along with Yang Bingxian. The two of them were like ice and fire. Raging Flame had seen the entire process of Nietion killing Yang Bingxian and the others. He was shocked that Nietion's control over sword was so terrifying. He was somewhat fearful of Nietion and didn't dare to take the risk. Otherwise, he would really want to fight Nietion. This kid called Nietion, his talent in the way of the sword is so strong. I'm afraid he's comparable to that guy. Li Jin looked at Nietion. The corner of his mouth twitched and said in his heart, "It seems that after arriving at the Sky Sword seal, I have to pay attention to him." Immediately after, Li Jin also sat cross-legged and entered a state of cultivation. He didn't want to make a move. He chose the same method as Nietion and let the illusion itself eliminate the others. Following that, everyone looked at each other. It was actually very calm. Many people couldn't help but sit down and enter a state of cultivation. They already understood what Nietion meant, so they adopted the same method as Nietion and let the illusion itself eliminate the participants. 3 days later, as the sword pressure grew stronger, half of the people were eliminated. 5 days later, there were still 100,000 people left in the illusion. 7 days later, there were less than 30,000 people left. And on the 8th day, there were only a little more than 10,000 people left in the entire illusion. These people could be said to be geniuses among geniuses. Each of them could be called a monstrous swordsman. Everyone was bitterly holding on, because they knew that as long as they held on for a little longer, they would be qualified to enter the Sky Sword Seal. After half a day, finally, a group of people couldn't bear it anymore and were killed by the terrifying sword pressure and left the illusion in the Sky Sword Seal. At this moment, the entire void shook and a world changed. The illusion disappeared, and everyone's divine soul returned to their bodies. Brother Nya, seeing that Nya Tian had woken up, Mo Qianjun shouted excitedly. The rock that was hanging in his heart was finally lifted. After he was blasted out of the illusion by Lu Yun and Ren Kunyu, he had been guarding beside Nya Tian. After that, Yang Bingxian, Lu Yun, and Ren Kunyu were blasted out of the illusion one after another. All of them were in a sorry state, and they looked at Nya Tian with murderous eyes, as if they wanted to eat him up. Mo Qianjun was really worried that they would directly attack Nya Tian, so he had been guarding Nya Tian. Fortunately, the 6 great skies were watching everything from high up in the sky, so Yang Bingxian and the others did not dare to make a move. At this moment, when Nya Tian left the illusion, the faces of Yang Bingxian and the others suddenly became ugly, and their eyes were surging with blazing anger. Nya Tian blasted them out of the illusion and deprived them of the qualification to enter the sword seal in the sky. How could they not be angry? But even if they were angry, they would not dare to make a move at this time. They had long been afraid of Nya Tian. At this time, those who had just come out of the illusion looked at the first sky in the void with a smile on their faces. After coming out of the illusion, they would enter the mysterious sword seal in the sky next. Everyone, congratulations on passing the test of the illusion in the sky. Next, you can enter the sword seal in the sky. The first sky said loudly, and his majestic voice made people's hearts surge. However, those who were eliminated had ugly expressions on their faces and could only look at them anxiously. Yang Bingxian, Ren Kunyu, Lu Yun. At this time, the first sky spoke again, looked at Yang Bingxian and the others, and said, "The 3 of you can also enter the sword seal in the sky." When the crowd heard the voice of the first sky, they could not help but tremble, and their faces became even uglier. They were also eliminated, but why could Yang Bingxian and the others enter the sword seal in the sky? Everyone was unwilling, but no one dared to stand up and question. The first sky has absolute power, and it can let anyone enter the sword seal in the sky. What's more, the strength of Yang Bingxian and the others is indeed very strong, and they are all in the top 10 of the sword list in the sky. Brother Nya Tian frowned and took a step forward. Just as he was about to say something, he was stopped by Mo Qianjun. The latter shook his head and smiled bitterly. "I know my strength. Even if I enter the sword seal in the sky, I will only be cannon fodder. It is better to stay here and take care of Brother Jiao." Nya Tian's eyes sank, and after thinking for a moment, he finally nodded. He wanted to fight for the qualification to enter the sword seal in the sky for Mo Qianjun, but since the latter said so, he did not insist. In fact, he knew that Mo Qianjun wanted to enter the sword seal in the sky, but he did not want to be a burden to Nya Tian, so he gave up. Chapter 3360. Chapter 355. Chapter 355. Guardian in the sky above the sky. The sword seal hung between heaven and earth like a giant. A terrifying aura permeated between heaven and earth, forming a sword-will barrier in the space. The first sky and the other skies brought the people who passed the test to the sword seal in the sky. What a powerful sword-will aura! Everyone was only tens of thousands of meters away from the sword seal in the sky. They were shocked to feel the sword-will aura released by the sword seal. Everyone present was a swordsman, so they were very sensitive to sword-will. The aura of the sword seal in the sky was vast and endless. Everyone stood outside the sword seal and looked up as if they were looking at a towering mountain. The sword seal in the sky is indeed mysterious. The sword contains the great Tao of heaven and earth. If I can comprehend it, it will be of great help to improve my swordsmanship. Tian frowned and thought to himself. He had never seen anything that could release such a terrifying sword will. The endless aura seemed to be able to cover heaven and earth, causing the void to tremble and heaven and earth to bow down. Everyone, I will open the sword seal in the sky now. Get ready to enter. At this moment, the sword will of the first sky skyrocketed and a terrifying sword momentum was released. It was violent and sharp, as if it was going to tear heaven and earth apart. As expected of Lord Sky, such a sword momentum is really terrifying. Everyone's eyes trembled and they looked shocked. The moment the sword will of the first sky bloomed, everyone felt a terrifying pressure and the void trembled slightly. The sword will of the first sky should be stronger than that of the sixth sky. Tian felt the sword will aura of the first sky, and his expression changed slightly as he thought to himself. Boom! At this moment, the first sky made a move. The sword will in his hand condensed into a sword, and he slashed out. The sword's shadow roared like a wild beast, oppressing the void and attacking the sword shadow in the sky. Boom! The sword shadow fell and landed on the sword will barrier outside the sword mark in the sky. After a muffled sound, the sword shadow collapsed, and a gap of 100 meters appeared on the sword will barrier. So strong, Tian's eyes trembled and he was shocked. First, breaking through the sword will barrier in the sky with a single strike. Such a method could be said to be terrifying. In the sky sword martial art, everyone's martial Tao strength would be suppressed to the peak of pseudo-saint. Therefore, the first sky broke the barrier of the sword seal in the sky with his sword Tao strength. Everyone, let's go in, said the first sky in a low voice. His figure flickered, and everyone entered the sword seal. Everyone's eyes were burning with passion. After that, their silhouettes moved, each displaying their own innate techniques, exploding forth with their fastest speed, madly rushing towards the gap in the barrier. Tian was not in a hurry and watched quietly from the side. The sword will barrier had a strong regenerative ability. At this moment, it was already slowly closing up. However, the speed was very slow, and it was enough for everyone to enter. However, at this moment, something unexpected happened. A figure came to the edge of the gap and unexpectedly stopped moving. He was extremely domineering, not letting anyone near the gap. Tian frowned and saw that the domineering person was none other than Yang Bingxian. Yang Bingxian, what are you doing? Seeing this scene, the first sky's face darkened and he roared angrily. Lord First Sky, many of these people are like ants. They are not qualified to enter the sword seal in the sky. Why don't I increase the difficulty of entering the sword seal and see if these ants can still enter? Yang Bingxian sneered and then released a cold aura from his body, sealing the gap. Then his figure moved and his evil eyes swept across Tian. After a cold smile, he entered the sword seal. Asshole! First Sky roared, and his face became extremely ugly. The cold aura that Yang Bingxian left behind sealed the entrance of the sword seal, causing everyone's speed to instantly slow down. But at this time, First Sky could not make another move, because he no longer had the ability to open up another gap. The sword will barrier formed by the sword seal in the sky was very terrifying and difficult to break. Just now, First Sky had integrated a mysterious power into the sword, and only then could he barely break the barrier. However, that mysterious power was left behind by the Guardian of the Sky, and it could only be used once. And now, Yang Bingxian had sealed the entrance. According to the current speed of entering, at least half of the people would not be able to enter the sword seal in the sky. What was more troublesome was that the cold aura that Yang Bingxian released contained a bloodline seal, which was very difficult to break. Unless someone's bloodline power was more terrifying than Yang Bingxian's, and they could use their bloodline seal to break it. And Yang Bingxian was a warrior from the Holy World. His father was Yang Sun, and his grandfather was Yang Gungri. His bloodline power was very strong. Even First Sky and the others might not be able to break the bloodline seal. First Sky's face turned very ugly at this moment. If only 5,000 people entered the sword seal in the sky, it would be a major dereliction of duty. The Guardian of the Sky would not blame Yang Bingxian, but only him, the First Sky. Let me do it. At this moment, a voice was heard, and then a figure flew out at an extremely fast speed. The person was still in midair, and he directly attacked. Boom! Boom! The sword shadow was like a dragon, bombarding Qian Sun's cold aura. After a muffled sound, the cold aura directly collapsed. Huh! First Sky's eyes trembled when he saw the situation, and he was shocked. Nietian. In the next moment, he saw the figure clearly and shouted out the name. At this moment, Nietian's figure had directly entered the sword seal. The others were stunned for a few seconds before they reacted and entered the sword seal one after another. This person's bloodline power is even stronger than Yang Bingxuan's. First Sky's face trembled as he understood, and his heart was filled with shock. A domain martial artist bloodline was actually stronger than a martial artist from the Holy World. It was simply unbelievable. However, Niet Tian blasted away the cold aura, which made First Sky very happy, and his tensed face relaxed. After a while, everyone entered the sword seal in the sky, and the sixth sky were the last to enter. In the sword seal in the sky, the sword will float in the void, and the floating sword shadows seem to have a life of their own, flowing in the air like fish in the water. Everyone looked at this mysterious and magical world in front of them, and their eyes trembled, and their expressions became infatuated. The inner world of the sword seal in the sky was a world completely formed by the sword will, and it was extremely mysterious. The sword will in the space made everyone feel comfortable and happy, as if they had integrated with the world. Boom! At this moment, the void suddenly shook, and then 3 figures descended from the void. At this moment, the sword will in the space suddenly became much more active, and the momentum of the world changed, collapsing towards the 3 figures. The aura of the 3 figures was very powerful, and each of them had the strength to reverse the momentum of the world. Looking at the 3 figures, Nietian's eyes couldn't help but tremble. He was very familiar with one of the faces. It was Eternally Merciless. The 2 people standing next to Eternally Merciless had auras that were not weaker than his, and were even stronger. Without a doubt, the 3 people in front of him were all Guardians of the Sky. First Sky's Huoweidong respectfully welcomes the 3 Guardians. At this moment, First Sky bowed deeply and spoke respectfully to the 3 Guardians of the Sky. Grandfather! Almost at the same time, Yang Bingxian let out a strange cry and suddenly pointed at Nietian and shouted, "The person who killed father is him." Nietian. In the sky, a gray-robed old man opened his mouth coldly, and his eyes were fixed on Nietian. He called out the latter's name word by word, and each word was filled with killing intent. Chapter 3361. Swords drawn. Nietian. Boom! When the gray-robed old man shouted this name, his rage erupted like a volcano, causing the space around him to tremble and rumble. It was as if the space was about to be torn apart under the pressure of a huge force. Whoosh! At that moment, a powerful aura exploded in the air like a raging wave, causing everyone to back away from the impact. The eyes of the old man in gray were like sharp blades, glinting with a poisonous intent as he locked his gaze on Nietian, as if he wanted to tear him into pieces and feast on his bones and drink his blood. Nietian didn't dodge. Instead, he stared straight at the gray-robed old man with a calm expression on his face. Although the old man in gray looked slightly aged, his hair was like steel needles, giving him a violent aura, like a ferocious lion or a ferocious tiger. His appearance was similar to Yang Xian and Yang Bingxuan's, which clearly indicated his identity. Yang Xian's father, Yang Bingxuan's grandfather, the second-ranked existence among the 7 Guardians of the Sky, Yang Gungri. Nietian had guessed Yang Gungri's identity, but his gaze remained unwavering, showing no sign of fear. The eyes of the crowd trembled, and they could not help but lower their heads, not daring to look at Yang Gungri's murderous eyes. This guy is terrifying. He's not even afraid of the guardians of the sky. They murmured to themselves as they looked at Nietian. In the next moment, a violent scene took place. Die! Yang Gungri's eyes flickered coldly as he let out a roar and slammed his palm down, causing a tremendous force in the air to suppress Nietian. Bang! In the blink of an eye, Nietian felt a terrifying pressure bearing down on him from all directions. It was as if a giant, invisible hand was pressing down on him, making him feel powerless to resist. Yang Gungri was the guardian of the sky, with immeasurable strength. How could Nietian have the strength to resist when he attacked him directly? If this palm were to land, Nietian would definitely die without a corpse left. Swoosh! Right at the instant of life and death, a swift and fierce sword insight tore through the sky, and it actually pierced through the palm image in the sky. Nietian's eyes flickered, and he immediately felt much more relaxed. His figure flashed, and he retreated several thousand meters, ingeniously avoiding the frontal attack. He made use of the gap created by the sword intent to save his life. But even so, his expression was still ugly, and a trace of blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth. The power of the Sky Guardian was unimaginable to the current Nietian. The crowd's faces froze, and they sucked in a breath of cold air as they looked at Yang Gungri in shock. Who would have thought that someone of Yang Gungri's status would actually directly attack Nietian? It was truly a bit overbearing. What was even more unexpected was that the other Sky Guardian had also made a move. In the void, Nietian steadied himself and bowed slightly to Eternally Merciless, expressing his thanks. Thank you, Senior Merciless. The person who had just saved him was none other than Eternally Merciless. Eternally Merciless? What is the meaning of this? Yang Gungri suddenly turned around, and his eyes were spewing flames of rage. He looked eternally merciless coldly and roared like a wild beast. He had not expected that Eternally Merciless would actually save Nietian. Brother Yang, with your status and strength, it doesn't seem appropriate to attack a martial artist with a transcendent sword physique, Eternally Merciless said with a cold expression. He killed my son, so I killed him to pay for my son's life. What's wrong with that? Yang Gungri roared, and his anger was like thunder. Yang Sun's death had spread throughout the sky, Sword Marshal. Although the 7 Sky Guardians were in the Sword Seal in the sky, they had heard about Yang Sun from some people who had entered the Sword Seal in the sky in advance. Yang Gungri knew that Yang Sun was dead, and in his rage, he wanted to rush out of the Sky Sword Seal to kill him, but he was stopped by the other Guardians. At this time, Nietian had come to the Sky Sword Seal. How could he let the enemy who had killed his son live under his nose? Today, Yang Gungri must kill Nietian and avenge his son. Yang Gungri, I heard that Yang Sun's death was a normal challenge. He died in the hands of Nietian, and it was because he was not strong enough. Who can he blame? Eternally Merciless responded coldly, and there was no fluctuation in his eyes. He said, a challenge between swordsmen is fair. This is the rule of the sky, Sword Marshal. Yang Gungri, as a guardian of the sky, are you going to take the lead in breaking the rules? Bullsh *T rules. Yang Gungri's face was gloomy, and he roared. He stared at Nietian and shouted, I will kill this kid today. Let me see who dares to stop me. Eternally Merciless words sounded reasonable, but to Yang Gungri, it was clearly sophistry. As a guardian of the sky, they were well aware that there were people who were outside the rules and could completely ignore the rules. Eternally Merciless words were clearly to protect Nietian. However, Yang Gungri was determined to kill, and no one could stop him. If he, as a guardian of the sky, had to watch the enemy who had killed his son jump around in front of him in the Sky Sword Marshal, then this guardian of the sky would be too aggrieved. Yang Gungri, with me here, you won't be able to kill Nietian today. Eternally Merciless eyes darkened, and he responded in a similarly determined voice. The atmosphere was tense in an instant, and the two guardians of the sky were at daggers drawn. The crowd was dumbfounded by the scene in front of them. The two guardians were actually going to start a war for Nietion. This was too inconceivable. At this moment, everyone was sure of one fact. Nietion was a person with a powerful background, and eternally merciless was behind him. No wonder Nietion dared to be so arrogant after entering the sky, sword martial, and even dared to kill Yang's son. Eternally merciless, you want to stop me? Yang Gengri's face darkened, and his eyes were filled with coldness. He looked at eternally merciless and said word by word. Looking at his posture, he was really going to fight eternally merciless. So what if I stop you? Eternally merciless replied coldly, and his words were as sharp as a sword. If you stop me, I'll kill you too. Yang Gengri roared, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. He released his sword momentum, and the void trembled as if it was about to collapse. How terrifying! The crowd's eyes trembled, and their faces were filled with shock. An expert like Yang Gengri was too terrifying. Can you kill me? Eternally Merciless was not afraid at all, and he responded coldly. He also released his sword momentum, and an earth-shattering power was released in an instant. Bang! The next moment, the two sword momentum collided, and the void shook violently. The momentum of heaven and earth suddenly changed, as if the world was about to collapse. The crowd retreated, and their expressions became even more horrified. The battle between the two guardians of the sky was going to be interesting. Chapter 33:62. Chapter 33:57. The first guardian, what a terrifying force. The sudden turn of events caused everyone's eyes to shudder. They could not help but exclaim as they glanced at the person who made the move. It was a white-robed swordsman who stood there like a sharp sword. He had come with Yang Gengri and eternally merciless. His identity was obvious. He was also a guardian of the sky. However, he looked very young. Judging from his appearance, he should be below 50,000 years old, or even younger. His temperament was elegant. As his white robe fluttered in the wind, he gave off the aura of a scholar and the pride of a swordsman. Most shocking of all was the strength of this white-robed swordsman. He was able to nullify the attack from Yang Gengri and eternally merciless, as if he was stronger than the latter two. Initially, everyone thought that the white-robed swordsman would be the weakest among the three. Who would have thought that he would be the strongest? The first guardian, Yang Gengri, and eternal emotionless sword attacks were neutralized, and both of them were stunned for a moment. They then looked at the white-robed swordsman and did not show any anger. Instead, they were extremely respectful. The first guardian? The eyes of the crowd flickered. Some of them could not help but exclaim. The shock in their hearts was written all over their faces. The white-robed swordsman was the first guardian. The first guardian was none other than the first guardian of the 7 guardians of the sky. Since he was the first guardian, his strength was without a doubt the strongest. However, the shocking thing was that the first guardian was so young. Many of the crowd had spent a long time in the Sky Sword Samurai, but it was their first time seeing the first guardian in person. Most of the matters in the Sky Sword Samurai were managed by the 6 sword slaves in the sky. Only a few important matters would attract the attention of the first guardian. As for the first guardian, not many people had seen him before. Even when the sword seal in the sky was activated, the first guardian did not show up. This time, the first guardian showed up in person, which surprised everyone. What are you two doing? The first guardian, Zhong Mingyu, glanced at Yang Gengri and eternally merciless, and said coldly, "Don't tell me you want to kill each other in front of me." Yang Gengri and eternally merciless narrowed their eyes, revealing fear as they lowered their heads and replied, "This subordinate dares not." It was obvious that they were very wary of Zhong Mingyu. "You better not dare." Coldly, Zhong Mingyu spoke, his tone filled with a sharp pressure. Looking at Yang Gengri, he asked, "Yang Gengri, are you sure you want to kill this swordsman named Nietion?" Yang Gengri nodded heavily and said, "My son died at his hands. If I don't kill him, the resentment in my heart will never be resolved." After saying that, Yang Gengri turned around and looked at Nietion with a pair of cold eyes. He must kill Nie Tian. Otherwise, he would feel like there was a thorn in his back and a fishbone stuck in his throat. He would never feel at ease. Eternally merciless. Are you sure you want to save Nie Tian? Zhong Mingyu's eyes focused on eternally merciless and asked, First Guardian, I mentioned Nie Tian to you before. His talent in swordsmanship is extremely strong. He is the most terrifying swordsman I've ever seen in my life. Eternally Merciless lifted her head slightly and said, he was able to kill Wan Jian's Sun with only the ultimate sword body. This is enough to prove how powerful he is. The Seal of the Sky has already been activated. It would be such a pity to kill such a talented swordsman at this time. Eternally Merciless eyes flickered as she paused for a few seconds before she continued. I believe that Nie Tian could become... I got it. Before Eternally Merciless could finish, Zhong Mingyu suddenly waved his hand and interrupted Eternally Merciless. He knew what Eternally Merciless wanted to say, but he could not let Eternally Merciless say it now. The crowd looked at Eternally Merciless in confusion. They did not know what Nie Tian was going to say. What could he become? Oomph. At this moment, Yang Gungri let out a cold laugh. Looking at Nie Tian with a disdainful expression, he said, You think a piece of trash from a domain can do that? How ridiculous! Yang Gungri naturally knew what Zhong Mingyu and Eternally Merciless were talking about. Is it funny? Eternally Merciless laughed and said, I think that Wan Jian dying in the hands of Swordfish who has just entered the Sky Sword Marshal is the real joke. Eternally Merciless, you're so presumptuous. Yang Gingri's scar was torn open and he was enraged. He roared and looked at Eternal Emotionless with a cold, killing intent. Do you still want to fight? I, Eternally Merciless, will accompany you to the end. Eternally Merciless responded cold and did not give in at all. You're going too far. Yang Gungri roared like thunder, and the sword intent in his body surged again. Enough. However, at this time, Zhong Mingyu's voice sounded again. His roar reverberated in the air and shook the eardrums of everyone present. Yang Gungri's eyes trembled violently. The sword intent in his body instantly converged, and he looked at Zhong Mingyu with some confusion. He did not understand why Zhong Mingyu wanted to intervene in this matter. Was it just to stop him from fighting with Eternally Merciless? Yang Gungri felt that this was not the case. He faintly felt that Zhong Mingyu seemed to be protecting Nie Tian. But what was the relationship between Zhong Mingyu and Nie Tian? Yang Gungri, I can understand that you want to avenge your son, but with your identity, do you think it's appropriate to attack Nie Tian? Zhong Mingyu said in a deep voice, his eyes revealing a sense of oppression. As expected, Yang Gungri's eyes narrowed and his heart sank. Zhong Mingyu was really protecting Nie Tian. However, I allow you to avenge your son in other ways. At this time, the corner of Zhong Mingyu's mouth twitched. His gaze swept across the crowd, and he said, Let the young people solve their own problems. Out of all the swordsmen here, you can pick any one of them. Let him fight with Nie Tian. If he can kill Nie Tian, then you will have avenged him. If not, then the matter with Yang Sun will end here. First Protector, are you serious? Yang Gungri looked at the First Protector, his eyes flashing like a sharp blade as he asked excitedly. I, the First Protector, keep my word, Zhong Mingyu said softly, his expression extremely firm. All right, Yang Gungri laughed out loud. Then, he turned to Nie Tian and said, Brat, I'd like to see what you've got. Just now, he had attacked Nie Tian. Although he was stopped by Eternally Merciless, he also realized that Nie Tian's strength far exceeded that of other swordsmen of the same level. Moreover, Nie Tian had killed Yang Sun, which was enough to prove his strength. But among the swordsmen present, many were from the Sword Star. They were prodigies trained by the sword marshals in the sky. Many of them were even more terrifying than Wan Jian.